congratulations. You've made the rest of our workload seem easy by comparison. And I'm blaming you, even though, again, I chose to do this. I chose to do this. I can only blame myself. I'm sorry to my therapist,
I'm the one
Meredith.
with too much time on his hands.
In 2017, Universal Studios announced the birth of a new shared universe of monster movies, bringing their classic horror icons into the contemporary franchise film landscape. But after the critical and financial failure of its first installment, the project was indefinitely abandoned. Now, in 2024, the powers that be have called upon one pulp horror devotee and one snarky film critic to unearth the concept. I'm Dylan Roth.
And I'm Dalton Deshane.
Are you afraid of the dark universe?
Whoo boy, welcome back to Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe, the podcast where we attempt to resurrect Universal's failed cinematic universe of monster movies, one pitch at a time. I am your composer, Dalton Deshane.
And I am your less glamorous background music composer.
No, we're both composing on this episode.
Not trying to take any of your thunder here.
True, you compose on a lot more of these episodes than I am. This is my chance. This is my one shot.
Yeah, Dalton, this is, I think, I don't think anyone would debate me on this. The most hotly anticipated episode we've ever done.
I know that I'm kind of nervous because, like, here's the thing. When you did your musical Phantom of the Opera, you had the element of surprise on your side, which
is really the only reason it was such a hit.
I don't think so. No, it's your episode is great. I think it's one of your strongest pitches. The music is great. I, though, did not have that benefit going into the. I knew people were that the expectations were going to be sky high because yours is a fan favorite, and now I have to do the sequel to it. Not unlike the Phantom of the Opera itself, and then having to follow it with a sequel. As Andrew Lloyd Webber failed at, and I didn't want to do that. Not to mention,
for anybody who has not looked at the title of this episode, we have indeed arrived at the Phantom of the Opera, Love Never Dies, our second musical episode and our first with songs written and produced by Dalton Deshane.
If this is your first episode of the show for whatever reason, welcome. We are in our phase 2 of our Dark Universe. We did the Phantom of the Opera because the Phantom of the Opera is a classic Universal monster from the 1930s silent age or 1920s silent age with Lon Chaney. And Dylan surprised me on air by revealing that he had written a musical, which I did not realize until people started singing in my headphones. And so now for this phase, we have swapped characters, which means I got the Phantom of the Opera, and I had to write a musical. This is
okay. Let's just be clear. You didn't have to write a musical.
But
the moment you heard, I went back and I listened to the first Phantom episode this morning.
Mm-hmm.
The moment you heard I did a musical, you said, now I have to do a musical.
The gauntlet had been thrown.
Well, no, I'm not arguing. Listen, I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm really excited for it. And
I could have said no. This is something my therapist talks to me about, is that I have the power to say no to people and I just don't. Look, this is something I'm working on.
You, our listeners, get to be the beneficiaries of Dalton
of my mental illness.
Yes, of ignoring their therapist's advice.
Yes. And look, also, not that I have a chip on my shoulder, but we released a holiday episode where we each put a song that we had written at the end of it. And afterwards, the Discord on multiple occasions started talking about You and Me and the Means of Production by No Jersey and how good it was, how much they wanted it on Spotify, how much they were listening to it. So good, one of my favorite songs. Not a single post about the Christmas song that was on that episode, to the point where I had to go back and check to make sure I didn't forget to include it at the end of the episode, because it was like it wasn't there. But you know what? That's fine. Look, You and Me and the Means of Production is a fantastic song. It's one of my favorite No Jersey songs, one of my favorite songs you've ever written.
It was Great Shot, Kid, but that's okay.
Was it?
It was Great Shot, yes.
Oh, I just assumed it was because that's like the newer. But yeah, Great Shot Kid. Well, I love Great Shot Kid because I was the one that told you to make it a single.
Well, the first time we played that on a real stage, you said that's the single, and then we recorded it and it became the single.
That's right.
Now, you have been talking long enough. You have not given me the opportunity to say, hey, Dalton, New Traditions is a fantastic song.
Well, I'm glad
and
you
it stays
think
in
so,
my head year round.
Ungrateful Discord didn't mention it. It's fine.
Well, Dalton, if that's really what drives you,
they're a bunch of Scrooges. Maybe they're just a bunch of Scrooges.
I will say, well, they should love it because it's a song about having kind of a bummer Christmas.
That's right. That's right.
But let me tell you all, I've only heard one track from this. because Dalton generously allowed me to sing one of these songs.
Yes.
Which is great because Dalton did not do what I did, which was to record a couple scrappy piano demos of songs. Dalton doesn't do that. As we said in the previous episode, the same way that I can't write a scene that's not an entire scene with all the dialogue and all my quippy bullshit.
Yeah.
Dalton can't just write a song on a guitar or piano and then call it a day. Dalton produces tracks for something that I cannot do. And Dalton
I had to bring my A game.
Dalton put their entire ass in this.
Yes.
It sounds fucking cool. It's really good. It is extremely professional on account of Dalton is a professional. You're never going to talk about My Phantom again after you've heard this.
That's not true. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this on the show, but my degree is in music composition. So I do this.
Yeah.
This is more my wheelhouse than writing fake movie scripts, I'll tell you that much.
I mean, we talked about this a little bit during My Phantom. It's that the idea that I would write a musical episode of the show before you wrote a musical episode of the show was kind of bullshit because your music is theatrical and you write novels to accompany your albums. So you sort of do write a musical, which is songs and a book.
While we're here, while you mentioned that, if you do like the music from this episode, listen to my band, Dalton DeShane and the Traveling Show.
Based on the track that I have heard, if you like this, you will love Dalton DeShane and the Traveling Show because it sounds like Dalton DeShane and the Traveling Show.
Although I will say, the song that you sing was the most like my shit. The other ones were more of a challenge because it was a little more outside my wheelhouse and more in the musical theater realm. But yeah, you'll probably like my band, and all the music from this episode will be available on our Patreon, patreon.com/Dylan and Dalton, after the episode is over. So if you like the music, you can download it and listen to it. But I don't want to set the bar too high for I gotta keep these expectations low because this was also, God, this was a lot of work because I'm producing all this shit.
This is the one where you were finishing the script in a scramble while I was on my way back here from the subway.
I wrote the last scene this morning. I read the script for the first time this morning all the way through because I was so focused. I started the music 2 months ago because luckily the nice thing about the way I write scripts is I knew exactly what the songs were going to be before I wrote a single word of the script because I knew the outline, which the only way I could do it if I was going to produce these, because if I was figuring them out as I was going, they would have had to be piano demos. But this is so much work to the point where now the idea of just writing a scriptment for The Invisible Man's Revenge, I'm like, oh man, it's going to be a fucking... All I have to do is write a 60-page scriptment. Easy. In 2 months? Oh my God, that's a breeze. I don't even have to write 4 songs for this. So congratulations. You've made the rest of our workload seem easy by comparison. And I'm blaming you, even though again, I chose to do this. I chose to do this. I can only blame myself. I'm sorry to my therapist,
I'm the one with
Meredith.
too much time on his hands.
I also did this while recording my band's album, so it's really been a wild couple months. I can't wait to sleep next week. But it is a long pitch. We should get into the expectations. I could talk all day about the writing process for this. Maybe we'll do that on a bonus pod sometime. But let's get into the fans' predictions because I know they've got to be sky high for this one.
Oh yes, like we said, this is a hotly anticipated episode. There's a lot of different angles that people came at this with their expectations when we asked people on social media.
Also because there's no clue yet as to what this will be because. Right. Like Native American Werewolf in Paris, we knew it was going to be in Paris. We knew about about Gwen going off with Victor and Cassie. With Love Never Dies, our Phantom died pretty definitively in the mummy's hand. So there's not even like a plot thread from the first one to really pick up on.
Right. We already picked that up and we finished Claudia's story, so far as I know.
Or did we?
In the mummy's hand. So, but we also, to begin with, now, you said in the episode where we announced our slate, you were specific that this is not going to be based on Love Never Dies, the sequel to Phantom of the Opera that was workshopped and toured and never actually opened on Broadway or the West End from Andrew Lloyd Webber.
I crucially had not seen it.
I have not seen it. I have only watched the Lindsay Ellis video about it a couple times.
I have seen it now. I have definitely seen it.
But nevertheless, there are certain elements that people think might be peppered in here from that. For instance, there might be a scene set at Coney Island, which is the setting of Love Never Dies.
Definitely my favorite place in the world, Coney Island.
Kellen at True Duckman on Twitter thinks someone should have a surprise son because that's a big twist of Love Never Dies. At Denny Guts from Twitter wants to see how you might incorporate Mr. Y and the Coney Island hideout. Evie Beach wants someone to be wearing a big peacock dress in Act 2.
There will be some nice dresses. I can spoil that.
It's great radio.
Yes.
But then there, of course, were a lot of people who had specific to our Dark Universe connections they wanted to make. Togue on the Discord predicts that the new Phantom will be someone who was nearly killed by Claudia in the mummy's hand, thus scarring and motive.
Okay.
A bunch of people speculated that the titular Love That Never Dies in some way is related to Set. One or two people say that now might be a great time to reintroduce Aminette. People are always saying that, though.
People love Aminette. People want her back.
The questions about Aminette's return have only been surpassed of late because the Discord is still wild about rat hands.
Yes.
People are figuring out how rat hands get figured into it. Again, a character we have never explained here on the show and is completely an invention of the Discord. We're going to leave it that way.
But by the way, if you don't remember because you haven't seen The Mummy 2017, which I don't expect anyone to have seen, Aminette was the mummy in The Mummy 2017.
Right.
The titular mummy.
Cryokina says that there might be a totally left field interpretation of a classic Universal monster, someone who we're not expecting at all. Andy from the Discord, says that this one will be more Jenny focused because the last one was more of a Carol story. I don't know if you ever officially confirmed that Jenny and Carol were in this.
I don't think so, but I will confirm it now. Jenny and Carol are in this.
And related, I planted in Heaven's Gate a scene set in the future of this where Jenny was going to be having magic powers and doing some dark magics.
So something just kind of thrown at me when I already kind of had the outline of this movie kind of figured out. And then I was like, oh, Jenny's going to be magic in 2 years. Okay.
Yeah. You know what? Sometimes I got to throw the curveballs around here.
That's fair.
And so there were a number of people who were suggesting that now you would have to establish where or why those magic powers come to be, and perhaps have some perhaps there is some reason why we see Jenny and not Carol in that scene. Zfig says the rest of the Dark Legion get cameo lines in the big showstopper medley, and Gwen has a howling part in the song.
Look, it was enough to wrangle 3 vocalists for
get
this.
The whole cast back.
I couldn't fucking do it.
Frodo Man,
but that would be fun.
Frodo Man on Instagram thinks that something might involve the ghost of Erica Lawrence, the character who turns out not to be the Phantom of the Opera in the first one, which is honestly the direction I think I would have gone if there had been a sequel. I think that probably would have done something with Erica.
So we could get Aubrey Plaza
in order to
here.
pay off the Aubrey Plaza thing. And also because I would have had no other idea of what to do. So I'm really curious. But Frodo Man is not the only person who wants to see a real ghost this time around.
Yes.
Our friends from Film Majors Pod want to see a real ghost because Carol's been wrong enough times. It's time for her to be right. And so does DG La Logue on Instagram. All the Instagram comments were very pro-ghost.
Interesting.
And finally, everybody on the Discord had their own guesses about a character whose existence you teased on the Discord only.
Yes.
You dropped 3 lines of dialogue from the script involving a character named Keith. So we know that there's a Keith.
There is a Keith.
Everybody wants to know about Keith.
You will find out about Keith.
What is Keith's deal?
I promise you will learn Keith's deal. It would be funny if those were complete fake lines and there was no character named Keith, but there is Keith.
Okay, well, then let's not keep people waiting about that Keith reveal any longer than we have to.
Well, we do have to wait a little longer because I have to talk about the director.
Oh, that's right. Who'd you pick?
We always forget to talk about the director until we've already teed up starting the thing. So whenever you hear us talking about starting the movie, just know we still have to talk about the director. Here's the thing. This is going to be controversial.
Oh.
But I was thinking, who's done good modern movie musicals, that I would like to see direct a musical? And of course, Spielberg comes to mind because West Side Story is a masterpiece. Didn't think Spielberg was maybe the right fit here.
Probably not.
And I landed on, I'm going to wait till you're done taking a sip of water so you don't spit it out. Tim Burton.
Okay.
I love Sweeney Todd. I think he did a great job with Sweeney Todd. I know that's a little controversial. Some people love it. Some people hate it. He's also done Corpse Bride.
True.
He didn't necessarily direct Nightmare. Did he direct Corpse Bride, or was that also Henry Selick?
He co-directed Corpse Bride.
Okay. But he didn't direct Nightmare Before Christmas, but he was heavily involved in it. I think the thing about movie musicals is you have to have someone that can get that heightened sense of reality. So I think where a lot of movie musicals like Mean Girls fail is they try to just feel like a normal film and then people start singing and it feels very discordant. Like the fact that like someone is breaking into song, it has to feel like an elevated version of reality where that might happen. And I think Tim Burton is really good at that because of his eye for aesthetic. Now, people pretty rightfully say that Tim Burton has fallen off in the last couple decades.
But he's picked up a little bit of steam lately with Wednesday.
And which I didn't watch, but I know people also love Big Eyes, which was sort of one of his smaller films that seemed like a more personal project.
I think Big Eyes is pretty forgettable. But
I did not see that either, actually.
But Big Fish is one of my all-time favorite films.
Big Fish is great.
That's 20 years ago now.
20, yeah. I think with the right project, he could still have the juice. And I think especially, Sweeney Todd was 2007, so not quite. That's 15 years ago, 16 years ago. I think he could still have the juice with the right project. There's a lot of imagery in this that I think could really benefit from his eye for aesthetic. And I think he just, he does have we just got to keep him off some fucking green screens. We got to keep him away from children's movies. Like, you give him something bloody to do on real sets. He's inventive with his camera. He's inventive with his design. He makes the music feel lived in and real. I think he could do this. And I want this to be, look, if this is all fantasy stuff anyway, I'm saying this is Tim Burton's return to form.
Okay.
This is going to be people are going to see this and film Twitter is going to be like, oh, we were wrong. This is going to be the Burton-assance.
Well, listen, I was bracing myself for you to say Tom Hooper. So
no.
I'm fine. I'm fine with Tim Burton for this.
I think the audience will be able to better picture some aspects of this through Tim Burton. It's sort of like you have the thing with Sam Raimi with Hunchback, where you might be able to better picture this film if you're thinking about it through his eye.
And that, after all, is the point of our picking directors for this, is to help us to establish an aesthetic for the listener, to provide them with a palette to paint the image in their own mind theater. Let me mix some more metaphors in there. Baseball.
Let's get into it. I am so nervous, but it is time for Love to Never Die. Submitted for the approval of the Universal Studios Board of Directors and also our rabid fan base. This is Dalton Deschain's The Phantom of the Opera, Love Never Dies. Act 1. The Dark Universe theme ends with an unusual dramatic sting, and the lights come up on a tense scene. 4 figures stand on a bridge suspended over fog. Meg Geary, played by Sharon Millerchip, sobs and waves a pistol, exclaiming, "Christine! Christine! Always Christine!" She swings the gun to point at Christine Daae, played by Anna O'Byrne, but the Phantom of the Opera, played by Ben Lewis, lunges. It's too late. Meg shoots Christine and she collapses. Meg runs off, distraught, and Christine's young son, Gustav, rushes to his mother's side. "Father! Where's Father?"
"Gustav, your father, your real father, is here."
The Phantom of the Opera looks at the boy, his face racked with grief. Gustav yells, "No! No!" The music swells again as Christine dies in the Phantom's arm. He cradles her limp body and screams, "No!" Gustav sobs into his dead mother's lap. The Phantom stands and walks to the edge of the bridge, crying into the fog below. Gustav stands and follows him and puts his hand on the Phantom's arm. The Phantom turns to his son and sings, "Love never dies, love never falters, once it has spoken, love is yours, love never dies, love will continue." The music swells again as the Phantom and Gustav hug each other. Gustav then removes the Phantom's mask, looking at his true face, scarred and disfigured. He caresses his father's cheek, and a curtain falls between them and us. Hard cut to Dr. Jennifer Halsey, played by Annabelle Wallis, and her wife, Carol Laemmle, played by Darcy Carden. They sit in stunned silence as the lights come up, very confused looks on their faces. The people around them start to gather their belongings as Carol just says, "Huh." Jenny and Carol emerge from the Ford Amphitheater onto the boardwalk of Coney Island, New York City. It's a midsummer night, and the walkway is crowded with beachgoers, running children, people selling all kinds of light-up doodads, and makeshift dance parties with DJs spinning Afrobeat records through a portable PA.
Now, I'm not much of a musical theater person, but was that
really bad? Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so not just me then.
They just shouldn't make sequels to beloved musicals. They never work.
This one certainly didn't.
But we cannot tell Jack that. He tried so hard to get us the right wedding gift.
No, of course not. If he asks, it's my new favorite musical.
Carol looks over her shoulder, suddenly paranoid. Oh God, I hope he's not here. Like, following us to see if we liked his gift?
He better not be. He's supposed to be bringing in our mail.
Wait, what is your favorite musical?
Technically this one, since it's the only one I've seen.
You know you just fucked up, right?
Oh, God.
Our fall plans are set in stone. I mean, first of all, we have to do the original Phantom, so you really appreciate how bad this one was.
Carol, we lived the original Phantom.
We lived a violent, gay, reboot of the original Phantom. You need to study the OGs.
I suppose Andrew Lloyd Webber is my cultural heritage.
Exactly. Then we'll move on to some Sondheim. Carol is cut off by a scream from nearby. Jenny and Carol run toward it, and suddenly it's not just one person, but a whole chorus of screams. They trace it to a rickety-looking haunted house attraction called The Ghost Hole. People are pouring out of it in droves, and then they see why. A poltergeist emerges from the ghost hole, its body translucent and its face a horrifying mess of fangs, its eyes hollow. In one hand it carries a scythe, the other one is clenched in a fist, holding something unseen.
What on earth?
A ghost! Carol sprints towards the ghost before Jenny can stop her. Jenny lets out an exasperated sigh. During this next part, while Carol sings, she chases the poltergeist around Coney Island, jubilantly and also carelessly. Jenny follows in frantic pursuit, narrowly saving Carol from a number of Looney Tunes-esque disasters, a falling neon sign from the Ferris wheel, holes in the boardwalk, etc. Carol sings.
Previously on the continuing adventures of the monster-hunting lesbian and derby girl, Miss Laemmle. I teamed up with my hot wife to fight a phantom for my life, but you should know that I don't scare easily. We also had some kinky sex, I guess that makes the phantom kinda sorta technically my ex. In retrospect, I do regret it, but I beg Jenny's forgiveness, now we both are wife guys. The phantom died and went to hell, I guess myself and Jenny kinda sorta technically as well, but we're expelled in a nutshell. Now we're both back and happy ever after, set for life, I swear. If I had a wishing well, I'd spend my life protecting the world from all the ghosts whose souls belong in hell.
When Carol reaches the climax of the verse, the poltergeist turns and uses his mysterious powers to drive all the bumper cars out of their corral and straight towards Carol's back. Carol is oblivious, but Jenny sees this and shoots a large glass tank outside the aquarium, sending 1,000 gallons of water and a dozen penguins flooding the boardwalk and washing the bumper cars out onto the beach. Jenny slows down, catches her breath, and sings.
This wasn't meant to be my life. From studying archaeology to queen of mummy murder sprees. No, this wasn't what I had in mind. I learned to shoot, I learned to fight, I learned to melt down monster kryptonite. To live to see just one more day. But then we met, I was reborn, and I had someone to keep fighting for. And now I vow to do anything it takes. If I had a magic spell, I'd spend my life protecting my wife from all the pain that waits for us in hell. A magic spell.
This thought is cut off when Jenny notices that Carol has chased the poltergeist onto the tracks of the Cyclone roller coaster. Jenny climbs up and runs after both of them, narrowly dodging the speeding cars still racing around the track.
Previously on the continuing adventures of two monster-hunting lesbians, Miss Jennifer and Carol Laemmle. Forgot to mention our friend Jack will show up later in the set, but you won't notice cause his skin can't be seen. I know that poltergeists are real, I guess I thought demons, that's kind of sort of technically they're dead. I'll skip the spiel, but they don't feel the same as spirits haunting mansions or my 3D run guys. Now I finally got the chance to start a business real, I guess, and sort of technically reveal, let's say, enhance my circumstances.
Finally, Carol leaps from the Nathan's hot dog eating contest platform and lands on the poltergeist, pinning him to the ground.
I got him! I got the ghost!
Jenny catches a glimpse of something in the ghost's hand and pries it from him. It's a remote control. She fiddles with it, and the ghost flickers and glitches. Suddenly, he's no longer translucent and horrifying. He's just a normal old man. Someone in the crowd yells, "Mr. Smithers, the special effects genius who designed the ghost hole before it was stolen from you by your greedy business partner?"
Aw, shoot, another faker.
"And I would have gotten away with it, too, if it weren't for you meddling lesbians and your dumb..." Wait, no, I guess it's just you two.
Should we get a dog?
2 years later.
Fuck. Hang on. It was very difficult to not. I know you could just cut my mic during it, but fuck, that was Dalton. If any of you listening are disappointed, what the fuck were you?
I had to do a big opening number, you know?
Yeah, it was Dalton. I'm blown away. Even with my expectations were not low. My expectations were and remain quite high because I know what you're capable of. Mm-hmm. This rocks. This is terrific. I love the you have your dueling sort of counter melodies thing that play on top of each other very well. I love the way that this introduces each of our characters very, very naturally and efficiently and in a very fun way. I love that it's also an action set piece. I like also that you are doing a thing that movie musicals need to do, which is to use the heightened reality of musicals and the freedom of movement and spectacle that cinema provides.
Yes.
To not just do exclusively people dancing in a big room, but doing the kinds of things you could do in a movie, like a crazy roller coaster chase.
Yes.
That would be very difficult to accomplish on stage.
Yeah.
So that's terrific. This is exactly what I would want from this, especially since I also get to sort of flatter myself by thinking that this song is sort of a sequel to the song that opens my version, where you have there are two different states of mind playing with each other.
Yeah.
So
it opened with a scene from Love Never Died, just like Phantom.
Yes.
Opens with a scene from Phantom.
And you've also used Coney Island.
Yes.
Extremely well. If we never see Coney Island again for the rest of the film, we will have gotten our money's worth from our trip to Coney Island. We have
theme park chase.
Yeah, we are on the boardwalk.
Scooby-Doo.
You have and the Scooby-Doo ref is great. We go to Nathan's, right?
Yeah.
And I love the way that this ends up being just another rug pull for Carol that she just cannot catch a break. Although it does kind of tee up at this point that she's going to have to. I feel like the expectation that's set up for me now is that by the end of this movie, she has to meet a real ghost. But the same could be said for my Phantom, and I didn't give you any real ghosts.
True.
So
I will also say that there's no chance that they don't do musicals at the Ford Amphitheater. They don't do musicals on Coney Island. But look, I fudged it for the bit.
Well, maybe after the Majestic was destroyed, people have started moving.
Yes.
There's been a little bit of a sprawl of the theater district to other places that they think might be
diaspora.
less likely to get blown up.
Yes. 2 years later, Portland, Oregon, Jenny and Carol's house, evening. We open on a 2-year-old corgi curled up on a rug. He perks up at the sound of the front door opening, and we follow him as he runs up to Carol Laemmle, who has just entered wearing a very gay Wildfang olive green jumpsuit with her name monogrammed on the breast. "Oh, there's my baby boy. How was your day, Jekyll?" Jekyll answers by giving her sloppy kisses all over her face. From the other room, there's a thump and the sound of Jenny moaning with frustration. Carol tenses. She didn't expect her here. She scrambles to hide her equipment in the coat closet. High-tech goggles, handheld scanners, something that looks like a Ghostbusters ghost trap. "Jenny?
In here!"
Carol and Jekyll follow her voice into Jenny's office, a claustrophobic space cluttered with books and ancient artifacts, as well as some cages holding live mice. Jenny sits at a messy desk, poring over a large tome. She doesn't look up when Carol enters. "Hey, I didn't think you were getting in until later."
"I managed to get an early flight."
Jekyll hops up into Jenny's lap, finally breaking her concentration.
"Jekyll, down! Carol, you know he's not allowed in here."
"Come on, bud." The dog doesn't budge. Jenny frowns, then holds her hands above Jekyll like a puppeteer. The dog is surrounded in a cloud of purple and green light, and at Jenny's command floats over the desk and out into the kitchen. You know he hates that.
"Well, he's got to learn not to come in here one way or the other."
"So, how is London?"
"Fine. Family is doing well. They send their love."
Carol walks behind Jenny and drapes her arms over her shoulders, kissing her cheek. "Well, I'm glad you're back." Jenny is finally sufficiently distracted. She turns her head and kisses Carol, the two of them sharing a passionate but brief little makeout sesh. What do you say we head up to the bedroom? We could try that scene we were texting about, the one with the bad doctor. Jenny pulls away.
I'm sorry, love. I don't think I'm up for it tonight. I've got a lot of work to do with this new grimoire.
Tonight? What is there, pop quiz tomorrow or something?
This one's a lot more urgent than most.
Carol lets go of Jenny, disappointed.
Hey, I'm sorry. You know I'm not usually in the mood on travel days.
One of these days, I'm going to look through those books and learn how to brew a horny potion. Slip it into your nasty British tea. Jenny gives her a stern look.
You'd better not. I've told you magic has a cost, and it must always be paid, especially spells that alter other people's emotions.
Horny's not an emotion. Besides, what about you levitating Jekyll out of here?
Well worth a few seconds. It will shave off my life.
Wait, it's going to do what now?
Why don't we do this scene this weekend? I'll even go out and pick some latex gloves and surgical masks.
Carol manages a smile. It's a date. She kisses Jenny on the forehead and leaves.
Door closed, please.
Carol shuts the door. Almost immediately, we hear the crackling of magic on the other side, and the door frame glows with more purple and green light from within. Carol grabs a bag of goldfish from the cabinet and then notices Jenny's laptop open on the kitchen table. It's open to a news article titled, Theft at Downtown London Prodigium Building. Subhead, the controversial government organization, unmasked by Cassie Falk in her Dark Legion expose, was the victim of a break-in last night. Carol frowns at this and glances back at the office, wondering if she should confront Jenny. Instead, she just shuts the laptop and heads upstairs. In the bedroom, she slips out of her coveralls and pulls on a pair of PJ pants with cartoon corgi butts all over them. She pulls out a black wooden chest from under the bed, looks around to make sure nobody's watching. She slowly opens it, and we play the tension like she's about to reveal some powerful secret. Then we look inside and see it's filled with sex toys. Cuffs, a strap-on, plugs, and of course, the Indiana Jones whip. She sadly removes the whip and sets it aside, then digs through the rest of the toys to pull out a cordless magic wand. She carries it to the bedroom door and closes the door on the camera. In a shot similar to the one of Jenny's office, we look at the closed door while from the other side we hear the buzzing of the wand turning on. The next morning, Carol comes downstairs to find Jenny already at the kitchen table, studying the same book from last night.
Good morning. There's coffee in the pot already.
Did you sleep at all? I don't remember you coming to bed.
Of course I did. You were knocked out pretty hard.
Jenny uses her magic to levitate her coffee cup into her hand. Hey, stop that! You can't keep cutting your life down. You need to live longer than me.
Says who?
You saw me at Evelyn's funeral. I was a total mess, and I barely even knew her. You're good at dignified grieving. You'll be much better attending mine.
Yes, but the point of me learning all of this magic is to make sure that doesn't happen.
And I've told you, you don't need to do that. Okay, fine. We die at the same time. Suicide pact. Face hell together.
Can we not talk about death first thing in the morning?
Carol tosses the coffee filter in the trash can, then pauses. Hey, what's this? She reaches into the trash can and pulls out a familiar device. It's Jenny's universal lockpick, covered in coffee grounds. You're throwing this away?
Huh? Oh, yeah. I learned the lockpick spell ages ago. It's just been taking up space.
But you love this thing. This was basically your Indiana Jones whip. Jenny shrugs.
I needed to clean out the junk drawer.
Carol looks down at it, feeling sad, but not quite knowing why. Well, can I have it?
Knock yourself out.
Just then, the front door opens. Jekyll sprints through the kitchen to greet the guest with a barrage of happy barks. It's Keith Heap, played by Alexander Skarsgård,
Oh.
wearing a sweater vest and glasses.
Okay, so are we doing the sort of like the Ghostbusters 2016 thing where we've taken the hunk and we put him in the nerd outfit?
Yeah, we have a dumb hunk. We have a himbo secretary in this that's kind of just like the 2016 Ghostbusters.
Okay, listen, it's a great bit and no one appreciates that film, so we're going to do it again.
And Alexander Skarsgård, I think, deserves the comedy thing that Chris Hemsworth had.
All right, let me put my voice on.
He laughs as Jekyll jumps on him.
Hey, ladies, clocking in.
Hey, Keith. Keith comes in, helps himself to some coffee, and then goes into another office. This one's much neater than Jenny's, with a desk in the middle that has a desktop computer, 2 neat stacks of mail and documents, and one of those wired office phones. There's also a nameplate that reads Keith Heap. Jenny yells in from the kitchen.
Keith, did I miss any important mail while I was gone?
Keith stands in the doorway with a stack of letters.
Not really. I turned down a few more documentary crews, sent out the canned responses to a few quote requests. Oh, we did get one ask from some people who have a podcast about that whole mummy incident from 2017.
Jenny makes a face and shakes her head.
Noted. Other than that, just a bunch of letters that I think are fan mail, but they're all in Spanish.
Jenny and Carol exchange a glance. Pretty sure those are in Portuguese, Keith.
I don't think so. They're from Brazil, not Portugal.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, Keith. That's all. Just give me a knock if anything important comes in.
She kisses Carol.
Have a lovely day at work, babe. Anything exciting happening today?
Oh, just another day in the spreadsheet trenches. I think one of the corporate bigwigs is making an office visit today, so hopefully lunch will be catered.
Ooh, bring me back a finger sandwich.
Will do. Have fun mastering the dark arts. Jenny shuts herself into her office. The second the door closes, Carol and Keith look at each other with mischievous smiles. You got anything new for me?
Oh, yeah.
Cut to the two of them in Keith's office, Keith at the desktop and Carol leaning over his shoulder.
Got a call yesterday about a sighting in the 5th quadrant. Concert venue at Canal Street.
I think it's pronounced Canal Street.
Ah, sorry, I'm not local.
Are we sure it's the same entity?
Seems like it. Owners came in to find the entire contents of the green room moved into the hallway, and all the hall decor in the green room.
The inside-out maneuver. Definitely sounds like our ghost. And what about...
The closing crew heard the piano playing itself before they locked up.
Billy Joel? Keith gives a grave nod. That's him, all right.
You're going to catch him this time. I can feel it.
Thank you, Keith. You're the best secretary we could afford. And I really mean that. Keith beams proudly.
Give him hell, Ms. Laemmle.
Quick series of shots of Carol suiting up, lacing her boots, zipping up her coveralls, putting her gear in an old backpack. Then we cut to her on a trolley, standing packed between the other commuters, Caroline Polachek playing faintly on her AirPods. Back at the house, Jenny sits in her office studying the same tome from the night before. Her eyes speed across the pages at superhuman speed, purple wisps of light trailing from the corners of her eyes. Finally, she shuts the book and closes her eyes, breathing deeply and digesting all she's learned. The camera travels in a slow circle around to look over her shoulder, and for the first time we see the book she's been reading. Eagle-eyed viewers will recognize it as the Black Book of the Dead, first seen in the 1999 Mummy, and last seen in Jekyll's private library at the Prodigium headquarters in The Mummy 2017. Jenny uses her powers to levitate the book in front of her face. She draws a sigil in the air with her hands and whispers a word in Coptic. The book suddenly bursts into flames in midair. Jenny watches it burn, the glow of the fire flickering on her blank face. Eventually, the book is nothing but a pile of ashes on her desk. There's a knock at the door, and Keith sticks his head in.
Sorry to disturb you, Mrs. Halsey, but there's a Mr. Cold here to see you.
Jenny frowns and nods. She was expecting this. Carol has arrived at the concert venue called the Temple Club. It's a former church that's been converted into a seedy rock bar.
Dope.
She's met at the entrance by the manager, an aging rocker girl with dyed hair and a leather jacket who looks scared out of her mind. Oh, thank God you're here. This fucking thing is going nuts this morning. Carol narrows her eyes. Show me. Inside the venue, the manager leads Carol through the winding backstage hallways to the green room. The lights flicker. Sure enough, the contents of the green room have been moved into the hall. The couch cushions have been torn to shreds. The vending machine is tipped over and spilling soda cans onto the floor. A flat-screen TV lies shattered against the wall. They step over the debris carefully. The green room door ahead of them is slamming shut and opening erratically. Stay behind me. As they approach the green room door, it slowly creaks open again and stays that way. The two of them peer around the door frame. Suddenly, the manager is yanked backwards by her collar and falls onto her back. She screams as she's dragged down the hall towards a pitch-black storage room. As soon as she's pulled into its darkness, the door slams, cutting off her scream and making Carol jump. Back at the house, Jenny finds Indrid Cold standing in her kitchen in his usual ill-fitting and strangely textured suit, sipping coffee.
As usual, you're a buck short and about 2 minutes late, Indrid. You here to arrest me?
It remains endlessly amusing how you and your friends think you're the center of the universe when you really have no idea how vast it is. Prodigium has bigger problems than you right now, Dr. Halsey.
Like 1,000 government hearings?
It's true that since Miss Falk's reckless account was released, Prodigium has more eyes on us than ever.
And arresting a member of the famed Dark Legion would probably not be the best look for you right now.
Indrid gives the smallest of nods.
So why are you here, Indrid?
He sets his coffee down and looks in her eyes. I came to say goodbye.
Goodbye? Where are you going?
The war I was sent here to prevent has already been lost. As a result, I have been called back by my superiors to observe the fallout from a safe distance, if such a thing exists.
Called back? To where? Who will run Prodigium?
The British government now. 200 years of effort now tangled up in bureaucracy because of you and your legion. if you thought I couldn't be trusted with its secrets.
Indrid, I'm sorry. I'm sure Cassie didn't mean...
Don't waste your energy. The end would have come with or without you. I have no attachment to this plane, and neither should you. But I would advise steeling yourself against what's coming.
That's exactly what I'm trying to do.
My dear Miss Halsey, no amount of mortal magic will be able to save the souls of everyone on Earth.
I'm not trying to save all of them. Just one.
Indrid nods with a condescending smile. And you think destroying the Book of the Dead will protect her?
That book was filled with the most powerful black magic this world has ever known. And I'm now the only one in possession of its secrets.
And you think that just because the book is gone, those who seek its knowledge will simply cease their quest? Jenny is silent. There is no way to stop what's coming, Dr. Halsey. But if I may, I'd like to offer one final word of advice. In your efforts to save your wife from her certain fate, take care not to ensure you're painting additional targets on both of your backs. Indrid puts on his hat and heads for the door. Before he leaves, he turns to Jenny one last time. Goodbye, Dr. Halsey. As frustrating as it often was, it was still an honor to work with you. You have my deepest sympathies for what comes next. And then he's gone. Jenny bites her lip, her brow furrowed with worry. Keith steps into the kitchen behind her.
Who the hell was that guy? Nobody. Cool fit, though. Where do you think he gets those shiny pants?
Back at the Temple Club, Carol yanks at the storage room door, but it's locked tight. She can no longer hear the manager on the other side. She turns when she hears the venue's sound system start blasting Billy Joel's Scenes from an Italian Restaurant.
No!
Carol runs into the main venue space, cavernous and empty. All the lights on the stage are on, running through a series of colorful light cues as if a concert was being put on by an invisible ghost band. Carol pulls her ghost trap out of her bag and readies it, but as she approaches the stage, the lights go out, and Billy Joel stops playing. Carol stands in the silent, pitch-black theater, the only sound her own panicked breaths. She listens intently, then holds her breath to hear even better. But even though we see Carol holding her breath, we hear another set of breathing over her shoulder. The hairs on her neck stand up and she tenses. Then we see the slightest dimpling of her skin as invisible fingers press into the back of her neck. She lets out her breath and sprints forward, arms held out to find the stage. She climbs up on the stage and the lights turn back on, and Scenes from an Italian Restaurant once again blares from the speakers. She breaks towards the wings, finding the fog machines and cranking them all to 11. Fog floods the stage, and through it she can just make out the outline of a ghostly figure. It turns to face her. She flips a switch on the ghost trap to turn it on and advances on the outline. But her gaze is fixed so squarely on the ghost that she trips over a thick cable running across the stage. The cable goes taut, pulling at an amp on the other side of the stage behind the ghost. It starts rolling quickly towards the figure, and it turns towards the sound just a moment too late. The amp collides with the ghost's crotch.
Oh, God damn it!
Carol picks herself off the ground, a look of disbelief on her face. Jack?
No, it's me, Billy Ghoul.
Jack, knock it off. What the hell are you doing here?
I'm haunting the Temple Club?
Carol shakes her head, trying to make sense of this. Wait. Have all of the Billy Joel hauntings been you?
Okay, don't get mad.
What the hell, Jack? I've just been chasing my invisible friend around the city again? Why would you do this?
Well, Jenny and I just thought...
Jenny? Oh my God, was this her idea?
Yeah, kinda. See, we both wanted you to be able to chase your ghost hunting dream, but thought it would be a lot safer for you if the hauntings were controlled.
Safer?
Not just that, we could also guarantee there were ghosts to hunt, so it wouldn't be as frustrating.
Carol works her jaw like she's about to yell, but can't think of anything to say. Instead, she bursts into tears and turns away, hiding her face from Jack.
Carol, I'm so sorry.
Don't. Just don't. Carol storms out of the Temple Club and into the bright summer day, finally able to sob without Jack seeing her. Music begins to play, and as she starts to pull herself together, she sings.
I wish I could make Jenny understand. What I want isn't only danger. I want to hold my wife's hand without feeling alone like strangers. I wish I could just let myself be mad. It's so hard when I know she loves all the trauma she's had, but I wish she'd let go and trust me. This isn't just a hobby, the ghosts and exercising, the gulf between us is widening, 'cause it's love that I've been hiding. And if I had a wishing well, I know what I'd confide. I wish that I could be myself with my wife by my side. I wish I could go back into the past before last brush with hellfire, before her first spell was cast, to when we first fell in love. I need the reminder. I wish I could just fuck my wife again without feeling the fantasy breaking. It's not quite as when the pain's the only real thing we're communicating. A passion kept in secret is so unsatisfying. I wish she'd share my interests and not infantilize me. And if I had a wishing well, I know what I'd confide. I wish that I could be myself with my wife by my side. And at the end of life itself, when all good things must die, I know I could face any hell with my wife by my side.
Carol arrives back home. Jekyll greets her with boundless excitement, but Carol can only muster some sad ear scratches. She passes by Keith's office on her way to the kitchen.
Hey, boss, did you catch it this time?
Carol eats an enormous spoonful of peanut butter straight from the jar. Don't ask.
Oh, my bad. You did get some exciting mail today, though.
Keith hands her a thick manila envelope. Inside is a large pop-up card. When she opens it, it unfolds into a tall, expressionistic Gothic castle, crafted in the most Tim Burton style possible. Carol reads the text inside. Dear Mrs. Laemmle, we'd like to invite you and your wife on an all-expenses-paid trip to the Bregenzer Festspiele, the world's largest opera festival, held in Bregenz, Austria. However, this is not an entirely altruistic invitation. We are in dire need of your help. Carol trails off but keeps reading, her eyes growing wider. As she reaches the end, a huge grin spreads on her face. End of Act 1.
Dalton, spectacular work so far.
I ended Act 1 maybe a little early, like our plot hasn't really kicked in yet, but there's so much character stuff that this is front-loading with. It felt like a good break point before, so we could discuss the character stuff and then sort of the A plot.
And as we always have to remind ourselves, these are not complete films.
Yes.
These are sketches of films that happen to include a couple of complete songs.
Yes.
Produced songs. So that there we have the return of Steph Salo as Carol Laemmle and Ella Dawson as Jenny Halsey.
Did both incredible, did a great job with their songs. It was great to be able to record them again, recorded them both here in this studio in person.
So just want to clarify a couple things here for the audience. So this is set after the Mommy's Hand because Evelyn's funeral is mentioned. Sorry. This
Heaven's
is set
Gate.
after Heaven's Gate.
Yes. The 2-year time jump takes us to after Heaven's Gate. So Jenny has already used the magic on the pillar and everything.
This is now the latest point in our chronology that we have seen.
Yes. We are now ahead of anything else we've done. I have skipped us forward. And also, the explanation for Jenny's magic is that after her and Carol went to hell in the Mummy's Hand, Jenny has been so worried about Carol and so obsessed with the idea of her wife having to face that she is now teaching herself magic because she's taught herself everything else. She taught herself to shoot. She taught herself Quicksilver stuff, because out of necessity. And now she's teaching herself magic so that she can be more prepared for anything that comes their way because they're the two non-powered people, or were at least anyway, in the Dark Legion.
Well, I like also that we had discussed during Heaven's Gate how my decision to give Jenny those powers was guided first by an image I wanted to use, and then retroactively justified with why wouldn't she do this if she's done all of this and she's capable of all of this, that she's in order to become this sort of omnicompetent monster hunter.
Yeah.
It's only logical that she would move forward and do that.
Yeah.
And so I like that now that's text. And that her motivation is very consistent with who we know her to be so far as a character.
Yeah, and it also gave me sort of the core of the conflict between them in this movie. That first song, the opening song, kind of serves as Jenny's I want song, right? Because her want is very simple. She wants to keep her wife out of hell, and so she learns magic to do so. But because she's so focused on Carol's safety, she also constructs this whole elaborate thing with Jack to fake these hauntings because she doesn't like the idea of Carol pursuing the supernatural.
Right. In the meantime, she's also kind of perpetuating two lies, right? It's the lie that she doesn't know what Carol is doing, and also the lie that of creating all of these fake hauntings. So she basically, as a way to ensure, or which at least she thinks is going to ensure the security of her family, is destroying it through just she's created the situation where her wife is going to be lying to her and not knowing that she already knows about the lie.
Yeah.
By creating her own new layer of lies. And I like that this kind of reverses the dynamic a little bit from the last one.
Yeah.
In that, in the Phantom of the Opera, Carol is being selfish. And her selfishness is kind of a very adolescent selfishness. And now Jenny is the one who's being selfish, but in a much more sort of grown-up way, where it is being selfish but for somebody else. Like, she gets to think of this as being something that she's doing for Carol. And she is doing it for Carol.
Yeah.
But this is also, what strikes me, as the kind of thing that you do because you do not have the ability to accept the things in life that you can't control. And so she is willing to basically destroy the happiness that she's built with this person if it means that she won't have to suffer in the future. And it's extremely an internal process for her. She's not sharing it with Carol. She's not giving Carol a say in it. So it's actually really very selfish of her. Yeah,
I wanted to give them a very sort of, if we had taglines for these movies, the tagline for this one would be "The honeymoon is over," because I wanted to explore their relationship. Now we've had their happy wedding and everything. I wanted to explore the sort of complex ways that couples can grow apart from each other, where it's not that they're not in love anymore. Like, it's not even that the sex has necessarily completely fizzled out or something, but there is a distance growing between them. And that distance is born of love in a weird way. Like, it's motivated by love, but that love can instill an insecurity and a fear that when it goes sort of unspoken, drives you apart. And that's why I thought Carol really needed her own I Want song, which is because what she wants is, like, first of all, just having to hide her ghost hunting is a wedge between her and Jenny. And now discovering this additional lie, and she's just like, this is the thing I love, and I can't share it with the person I love. And that's a really hard thing to get past, you know, and it makes you feel a million miles away from your partner, even if you both still love each other, you know? And so I wanted to really try to make a kind of textured and layered conflict between them. That's not just like, oh, we don't fuck anymore, we don't like each other, the spark has died. It's like, no, the spark is there, it's just gotten really complicated.
Yeah, their lives are very complicated. They deal with, now granted, everyone kind of has this knowledge now, and we could probably do a whole movie about how other people are handling the we're all going to hell thing.
Yeah.
But there's an incredible burden on them as people who at least believe that they can do something about it.
Yeah.
And Carol gets a little bit of her want in the opening number too, in that she is still thinking in a big heroic way, what she wants to protect the world. And Jenny, who is the more grounded of them, maybe is setting her goals, setting up a sort of contingency plan.
Yeah,
which is if we can't save the world, and Indrid Cold has just told her you can't.
Yeah,
we can talk about that too. That's an interesting angle. Then she's going to try and save the only thing that matters to her. Now, what she probably has not considered is, okay, she saves Carol and nobody else. What would existence even be like for her, right? That's potentially as bad as anything else that could happen to her.
Yeah.
But she can't think that far through. Like that conversation, as much as it's like kind of played for humor, about like, hey, I don't want you to die before me. We can't handle it. We got to agree to die at the same time. Is a conversation that I know that my wife and I have had. Like it's kind of a joke, but before our son was born, we used to occasionally just when something dire, we hear about a horrible accident, we just turn to the other way. One of us go, meteor, right? Because we had agreed the idea is the way that we would want to die is to have a meteor just crash and destroy us both simultaneously. Sure, it's more complicated once you have a child. Perhaps more complicated once you have an adorable little dog named Jekyll. But it's hard. It's when you are attached to somebody, when you are very deeply in love with somebody, it's very difficult to confront the possibility of life going on without them. Even worse, if you know for a fact that when life ends for one or both of you, the only thing waiting is eternal torment.
Yes.
So I like that this is mostly, there's still so much in this that's lighthearted and it's fun and the characters are very entertaining. But the dread of our horror universe is still sort of the kernel that makes the whole thing, that around which the whole thing is built.
Yeah.
Other little sort of story things you've thrown in here. I like that we have kind of we finally put the last bit of separation between our characters and Prodigium by removing Indrid Cold.
Yeah, that just kind of came to me. That wasn't part of my plan. It just came to me while I was writing it. And I was like, fuck it, let's see what we can do if we force Prodigium out of the picture.
Yeah, and honestly, like it might be more difficult for us to do some things practically when we do the next Dark Legion films, but we've also changed the power dynamic where like our characters no longer have to do things in secret. There would be people who would be dying to give them money to do stuff to try and save the world. So they've kind of outlived their usefulness at this point.
Yeah.
And it's also like a terrible omen to have Indrid Cold say, I'm going home. Home to where? Away from this shit.
Yeah.
See ya.
Because it's over. The game is over.
The game is over. We've already lost.
Yeah, there's no reason to be here. Which, by the way, I don't think Jenny knows about all the heaven stuff.
No. Because I don't think any of our characters do. The only person
Indrid,
I think Indrid might know.
Yeah.
Right. But the only character who we learned it through is Evelyn, and she's there now. She didn't get to tell anybody before she died.
My idea with this whole Indrid thing is that heaven has fallen. And Indrid knows this, and so he's like, and we can talk maybe more about that.
Well, that could be important for our timeline
but,
because we don't establish when exactly the post-credit scene in Heaven's Gate takes place. So it could have taken, I think it's sort of implied to have taken place immediately, as if the act of opening that gate, the titular gate, is what alerted them to the presence, but we weren't locked into that. I think it's fair to say we're now locked into it. Heaven has fallen.
And Indrid hears that and he's like, oh, well, that's it.
That was kind of our last thing.
Yeah. One thing I want to point out, did you recognize the chorus melody?
I did. I was about to bring that up.
Okay.
Carol's Lament. You had asked me to send you I've written very few recurring leitmotifs for characters on this show. And one of them is the love theme between Carol and Jenny. You asked me to share it with you in advance of this. So I really appreciate, got a little choked up when I heard that used as the main chorus melody. And you made it a waltz too, though. So you mixed it up a little bit.
I put it in 3/4, yeah.
And so that's very nice. It's a sweet little song. Great job, Steph Salo, in the performance of that.
Yes.
I'm trying to think if I have any sort of like critical notes yet, but I think it's too early to have anything like that. I'm mostly just very much enjoying myself.
Yeah, there is definitely some structural issues here with the pitch, which is
you already brought up that the movie hasn't really started yet.
And because of that, I do have to kind of just get some pitchier alighting when it comes to some of the rising action, because they're because I wait so long for the plot to get in, I was like, there's just not room unless we want this to be another two-parter to really put some of the beats that need to be here. But we'll talk about that when we get to it. In the meantime, should we jump into Act 2?
Let's go.
Oh, actually, before we get into Act 2, I should talk. This opera festival is real. Okay. And I actually encourage people to look it up because, as we're going to see, I have been here. This is, write what you know. This is a real opera festival in Austria. It's one of the biggest in the world. And it is very well known because the stage floats on Lake Constance and the audience sits on the shore. I recommend if you've got your phone on you and you can look up the Bregenz Festspiel West Side Story production.
You want to maybe tell them how to spell that?
Fest and then Spiele. Festspiele. If you just search Bregenz opera, you will find it. But they build these incredibly elaborate sets on a lake. It was in Quantum of Solace, the James Bond movie. There's a big scene that takes place at this opera.
Oh, I didn't realize that was that. That's a really cool sequence.
Yes, I have been there. The operas are incredible. The setting is incredible, and that is where we are now. So if you want to. These are all real places you can look up. You can look up the Festspiel House, which is our character's about to go to. But this is a real opera place in a real town. Anyway, Act 2. Carol, Jenny, and Keith disembark from a private plane at Bregenz's tiny airstrip.
They really didn't need to fly us private. These things are terrible for the environment.
Oh, don't be so negative. We're on vacation. We're guests of honor. We saved the world. We deserve a little luxury.
We get invitations to galas and events all the time. I still don't understand why you picked this one. I didn't even know you liked opera.
What do you mean? Opera's just like musicals, but more,
I think you might be a bit disappointed, my love. I used to go to the opera with my family all the time as a child, and none of it was as exciting as something like the Beetlejuice musical.
Well, we can fix that pretty easily with just a little groping. Carol playfully squeezes Jenny's ass, and Jenny yelps.
Hey, we're in front of company.
Two people stand in front of them on the tarmac, a driver and a severe-looking woman in a black pantsuit and sunglasses, played by Carrie Ann Moss.
Yes! Fuck! This was on my list of we got to get Carrie Ann Moss in this. She was born for this.
Carrie Ann Moss is
yes, I think our first Matrix cast member.
Oh, probably.
Wait, no, I had the Merovingian in the last episode.
That's right, yeah.
Right, okay, let's keep going.
Hello, you must be Carmen. Carmen shakes their hands.
Yes, Carmen Lebleu. It's an honor to host you both. And once again, I'd like to thank you for saving our outreach facility in Manaus.
It was our pleasure.
Yes, there's nothing more rewarding than saving private property.
Carol elbows her. Carmen gestures towards the town car.
Come, I'll tell you all about our program on the way.
Carol jogs up to Carmen, creating some distance between herself and Carol. Hey, remember, Ixnay on the Oast gay. Jenny catches up.
What was that, dear?
Oh, I was just asking, is our host gay?
Carol!
You're right, totally inappropriate, never mind. Carmen smiles.
It's quite all right. I'm aware of the impression I make.
This leaves Carol a bit speechless. Jenny rolls.
Yes, I am bisexual, but...
yeah, I literally... this was literally a reference to that, yeah. Just making everybody gay. All the women are gay. Jenny rolls her eyes.
Just interject here. Do you remember early on a previous episode, we had put out we had made a reference that if any straight women listen to the podcast, they should let us know. We made that one of our social clips on all cross social media, and we got 0 bites.
Nobody responded.
So going forward, we are going to assume that no straight women listen to the show.
Jenny rolls her eyes at Carol and keeps walking. The town car drives through the picturesque town of Bregenz, a quiet and sparse enclave on the shores of Lake Constance. Most of the residential areas appear completely untouched by the 21st century until they arrive at the Festspiel House, an ultra-modern arts facility right by the water. Carmen guides them through the Festspiel House, giving some of its history and talking about some of the operas that will be performed at this year's festival. Some young girls milling about stare at Keith with hungry eyes, and he smiles sheepishly. Carol elbows him and reminds him this is a working vacation for him. Then Carmen leads them through the rear exit of the facility, out into the open air overlooking Lake Constance, and Jenny, Carol, and Keith's jaws drop.
Welcome to the Sebuna, the floating stage.
They're standing on the upper edge of an enormous open-air amphitheater that faces the water. An elaborate stage floats on the lake, one that looks just like the expressionistic castle from the pop-up invitation, its spires reaching high into the air. Performers in street clothes pepper the stage and also lean out of the windows of the castle towers, rehearsing.
This is our main stage here at Festspiele. Seats 7,000. The orchestra is hidden away in a separate facility and are able to monitor the performers through a video setup with almost zero latency.
Keith says excitedly.
Oh my God, I recognize this from that one James Bond movie.
Wait, which one? Carmen smiles proudly, but then Keith says,
the bad one.
Carmen's smile falls.
And you three are lucky enough to join us for a monumental year. For the first time, the floating stage will be home to the premiere of a brand new opera by internationally renowned composer Georg Barta.
They are interrupted by a voice booming through the speakers of the amphitheater, shouting at the performers in German. We notice two men sitting halfway down the stands wearing headset mics.
And there he is, Georg.
One of the men turns. It's Georg Barta, played by Kenneth Branagh. He says something to his partner, played by Sterling K. Brown.
Yes! This is just a cornucopia of like my favorite guys.
Yes. And Georg heads up to join our cast.
Georg, come say hi to our guests.
Ah, yes. You must be the world-famous Dark Legion.
Well, two of them.
The ones that aren't monsters. Oh, good. Then I shall not have to look over my shoulder for the full moon every night.
And I'm Keith.
Nobody acknowledges this.
Congratulations on the new opera, Herr Barta. This is all just stunning.
It is, isn't it? I'm not quite used to having such a budget, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't enjoying it. What's the show about? It's called The Ring and the Mad King. Do Americans know about the Mad King Ludwig? Jenny and Carol shake their head, but Keith perks up.
Ludwig II, right? Also known as the Swan King or the Fairy Tale King. He was king of Bavaria until he was deposed at the age of 40 for being insane. He drowned himself the same day.
Everyone stares in stunned silence. Yes, that is correct. Although the matter of his suicide is disputed. Many modern scholars believe he was actually killed while trying to escape the castle grounds. But my opera isn't so dramatic as all that. See, Ludwig was the main patron of the famous composer Richard Wagner. It's safe to say that without Ludwig's financing, the Ring cycle would have never been finished. My work is about the relationship between these two controversial men, hence the Ring and the Mad King. Carol's eyes have fully glazed over. Jenny nods politely. Georg gestures to the stage on the lake. That castle there is a loose representation of Neuschwanstein Castle. The real one's just about 70 miles east of here on the Forgensee. Ludwig built it in honor of Richard Wagner, and thus it is the backdrop for my show. Fascinating thing about the castle, Ludwig died before construction was complete, so only 15 of the 200 rooms inside were finished. The rest of the castle is just empty brick caverns. Carol gives an unconvincing, wow. Anyway, I should get back to rehearsal. It was a pleasure to meet you both. Perhaps tonight we can find time to talk about all the, unpleasantries. He jogs off, leaving Jenny looking confused and Carol a bit panicked. Carmen saves the day by cutting in.
Let me show you to your suite. Later,
Jenny and Carol are unpacking their stuff in a luxurious VIP suite.
Hey, have you spoken to Jack recently?
No, not for a little bit.
He's been acting weird. Distant, almost.
Huh. Sounds like maybe he's feeling guilty about something.
Why would you say that?
Oh, you know, that's Jack. Lots of ups and downs. Jenny lets this go and pulls Carol close to her, a sly smile on her face.
I'm so glad we did this. We've been needing some time to reconnect. And this bed looks so comfortable.
Jenny begins to kiss Carol's neck. Carol looks uncomfortable. I don't know, Jenny. Then Jenny goes for her earlobe and Carol lets out an uncontrollable moan. Carol pushes her off before she can go further.
I'm sorry, what's wrong?
It's just the jet lag, I think. I don't really feel sexy right now. I think I'm going to go for a walk.
Oh, that sounds lovely. I could use some exercise to keep myself from falling asleep so soon. Want to head down to the lakeshore?
No, I mean, by myself.
Oh.
Sorry, I'm just in a mood. I think I need some alone time.
No, yeah, of course. That's important.
Carol makes for the door.
Hey, before you go, I'm sorry for being so distracted these past few weeks. Months, I guess. With all the magic and everything. I know I've been distant, and I hope we can use this trip to close that gap.
She smiles at Carol hopefully. Carol doesn't return it. Yeah, me too. Carol leaves and Jenny's smile falters. She stands looking at the closed door for a long time, not sure what to do. Carol walks through the empty courtyard outside the Festspiel house at sunset, eyes downcast, deep in thought. There's a sudden, intense gust of wind that blows her hair and makes her shiver, punctuated by a slamming from behind her. She turns and sees the door to the backstage area swinging open and slamming against its frame with the wind. Inside, there's a single small cone of light from an overhead lamp, also swaying with the wind. Curious, she crosses the courtyard to the door and peers inside. Hello? Inside the door is a deep stairwell that goes down and down into darkness. She takes a few steps, and the wind howls past her again, screaming through the narrow stairwell and fading perfectly into an actual scream from the bottom, followed by the sound of a struggle and then a thump. Carol speeds down the stairs and bursts into an expansive but cluttered backstage area, filled with half-finished sets, racks of costumes, and rigging equipment. On the floor in front of her is a white dress, crumpled and flecked with blood. An arm grabs her from behind and pulls her into a headlock. Where is she? It's Weston Hayden, played by Sterling K. Brown, who we saw earlier with Georg. He's bleeding heavily from his head and looks dazed. What? Let go of me! Where's Catherine? Carmen and Georg appear through another door and rush to break the two up.
Hey!
Georg separates them and an argument ensues, which I will summarize. Weston explains that he was meeting with a member of the ensemble, Catherine, for a costume fitting, when a light pole tipped over and hit him on the head. He was briefly knocked out, but woke to the sound of Catherine screaming. By the time he wiped the blood out of his eyes, she was gone. That's when he found Carol. Carol explains that she was just followed the sound of the scream. Carmen vouches for Carol, saying she's a special guest who only arrived today. Then Carol points out, wait, why were you doing a costume fitting alone at 10 o'clock at night? Weston sputters. Georg and Carmen exchange an awkward glance.
Carol, this seems like a good opportunity to get you up to speed.
Cut to Carmen's office overlooking the floating stage, the glowing, spooky castle hauntingly beautiful in the night. Weston sits with an ice pack to his head, while Georg and Carmen stand with their arms folded tensely.
It started almost immediately after rehearsals began.
Let me guess. Strange sounds at night, equipment moving on its own, maybe a crashing chandelier or two?
Worse.
People are disappearing, never to return. Whoa, haven't seen that one before. How many people?
12 so far.
Weston pipes up. 13.
Right, 13.
Carol looks at Weston. I'm sorry, who are you again? That's Weston Hayden. He's our director. Sorry about strangling you. Water under the bridge. Is there any rhyme or reason to the people that have been taken?
Started with backstage crew members, riggers, union guys. But now he's begun to advance into the cast. Just ensemble members for now, but I'm guessing it's only a matter of time before he goes for our leads.
Wait, you said he. Do you know who the spirit is?
Georg and I are of the opinion, and I know this sounds absolutely crazy, that it might be the Mad King Ludwig himself.
Weston again replies wearily. It sounds crazy, all right. Look, 2 years ago the idea would have never crossed my mind, but after what happened in Manaus, not to mention the werewolf rampage in Paris, I'm not ruling anything out anymore. I am. The idea is ridiculous. Clearly we just have a maniac in the crew, someone with a key to the backstage area and a sick mind. Why would King Ludwig want to haunt the production? Well...
We may have taken a number of objects from his castle to use as props and set decoration. You know, as a cost-saving measure.
Which I said was a bad idea from the start.
Staging an original opera at this scale is financially risky. Not only would it save money, but it would be a selling point in the marketing.
Okay, easy fix. We just return the stolen props and Ludwig follows them home. Already done. Did it after the 4th disappearance. Huh. He must still be after something. Are you sure you returned everything? That there's nothing else he could be upset about? Georg shoots Carmen a look, one that says, are you going to tell her? Carol doesn't see this, and Carmen doesn't acknowledge it. She just says,
no, that's everything.
Carol thinks. Okay, I'll do some digging around, talk to crew members, see if anyone's seen this thing firsthand. Step 1 is to try to uncover a motive. That way we can finish his business and let him get back to his castle. If that fails, we capture him.
Have you done that before? Successfully captured a spirit?
Yeah, of course. Carol lies. Georg claps his hands. Thank you, Mrs. Laemmle. See, Carmen, I told you the Dark Legion was the way to go. Weston rolls his eyes. And in the meantime, I'll tell our principals to start carrying heavy artillery.
Weston?
It's a better idea than all this. If we lose our Ludwig or our Wagner while you three are out playing Scooby-Doo, this whole production is over. How's that for a financial risk, Carmen? Weston storms out of the room. Don't worry, the Dark Legion's on the case. Just remember not to mention any of this to my wife.
Of course.
Carol sneaks back into the suite, where Jenny is already fast asleep. She climbs into bed, and Jenny automatically rolls over to spoon her, burying her face in the back of Carol's neck. Carol lies there, eyes open, looking guilty and conflicted. And this is a good spot to cut to our break.
All right. It's like the most difficult thing here, and I mean difficult in terms of a thing that's supposed to be stressful for the audience, is that it's really hard to watch Carol and Jenny fail to communicate like this.
Yes.
That Carol really just needs to confront Jenny. I always kind of, like, everyone's been in this situation usually when you're younger and you haven't been through this before and you don't realize the thing you have to do is just talk about whatever the thing is or it'll just get worse. But Carol not sharing what she knows with Jenny, whether she really knows it or not, is really kind of just punishing Jenny.
Yeah.
And it's she can justify it by talking about how it's too hard for her to do right now or something like that. But I think that there's something about when you know something that has changed the context of your relationship and you hide it, no matter who's at fault. I think that there's a certain thing where it just becomes, as an outside observer or in hindsight or whatever it is, it gets really hard not to be angry with that person.
Yeah.
But also, we love Carol and we love Jenny, right? And so the idea that I now feel at this point, and this is something that I think is very valuable in telling a story about two people who love each other and who we love and whose relationship we are invested in. We have a reason to be mad at both of them.
Yeah.
We know who has caused the problem. The problem begins with Jenny. But it's not, and it rarely is in real life, simply a matter of one partner being at fault.
Yeah.
We have now crossed this threshold where they are both fucking this up.
And they're pushing away from each other.
Yeah. And it's really hard. It's hard to watch, and we want to see that get resolved. And it's a really good tension, especially since we are now in the fifth story with these characters together.
And the way I think about it in my head is that Carol probably would have confronted Jenny about it if she hadn't gotten that invitation. Because I think her getting the invitation, it was almost like she was maybe like dreading, like, oh, we have to talk about this. And then she's like, wait, this is salvation. It's revenge in a way. It's my way of, I'm going to be able to prove to Jenny that I can do this, that something real is here.
Right.
And I'm going to rub it in her face after doing this.
Then after she's done it, then she can reveal that she knew.
Yes.
And then it becomes the kind of thing where she's like, all right, so this is a thing. Someone's asking me to do the thing that I want to do, that you have been tricking me into thinking I've been doing.
Yeah.
But this can't have anything to do with you. I mean, probably not. And Jenny's got lots of resources.
Yeah.
It would be a twist that would feel too comedic for the I feel like the comedy is mostly finished now. We've done the light first act stuff, and now we're into the middle. And oddly enough, this is actually, I know that we did Sam Raimi last episode, but this is kind of making me think a little bit of the tone of Spider-Man 2 or 3, where you get all of the light stuff done early. And it's a thing you can frequently do in genre sequels, right?
Yeah.
You want to set a new status quo and you want to return to the fun of the first one. But especially in sequels that are part of a series, like a 3 or more, there's usually a big escalation in tension and a darkening of tone.
Well,
so you start with the establish of, we're having fun. And we remember how fun it was to be with these characters, and then you have to gradually lower that dimmer switch. I think it would be very hard to flick the lights back on now with something like that.
Well, and in regards to director, I mean, with Tim Burton, Edward Scissorhands.
Sure.
Right? Very quirky. I mean, I think he does that too very well, like with the kind of quirky, cartoonish comedy, and then getting very sort of gothic and serious, at the same time.
I think but this would be a challenge.
Back to 1990 Tim Burton.
Sure, but we're talking about Tim Burton as the director of this, and we talk about this wanting to be a return to form. I think he honestly would have to show me something a little bit new here in a way that I would want to, right?
Yeah.
Like my favorite Tim Burton movie, and I actually have it on the calendar to eventually do a bonus episode about Tim Burton.
Nice.
I guess we scribbled it out after some conversation we had. I keep kicking it down the road because we need to do it when we don't have a lot of time commitments.
Yeah.
Is my favorite Tim Burton movie is Big Fish, because he's only doing Tim Burton-y stuff for part of the movie.
I think the script would only give him a couple Tim Burton-y moments, and the rest of the time, like, I think Sweeney Todd is kind of that way. Sweeney Todd isn't really ultra Tim Burton-y. Like,
no,
he's really
but it is heavily stylized from front to back.
It's stylized, but not in his usual style. Like, he doesn't usually do gore and like blood. And so it's sort of like a new Tim Burton-y take on blood that we hadn't really seen to that point, but like is stylized in a way you would expect him to stylize it, you know? And so, yeah, I'm hoping he would bring some new tricks to this. But again, I'm blue skying the Tim Burton involvement.
I also want to applaud that we were running up to it. I saw you had a bunch of dialogue with yourself coming up with Georg, and I'm like, are you going to do an accent? You're going to do a voice?
It's an incomprehensible accent.
No, but that's perfect because you cast Kenneth Branagh.
Yeah.
So like I'm hearing Kenneth Branagh in like Tenet doing like, you just watched Tenet, I'm sure, doing several like times. I guess that's a Russian accent, right, Kenneth? It's like, no, it's a Kenneth Branagh accent.
Yes. I'm doing the Kenneth Branagh accent.
Yes. And that's perfect. It is like we talked about there being sort of the weird pacing. I do not feel like we are at the midpoint of this film, which is usually where we put our break.
That's kind of the problem. We'll talk about that a little bit afterwards.
And it's honestly something of a relief to have this happen to someone other than me. But
yes, look, I had too long to chew on this one. I focused on the thing. I think it's all going to work out in the end, but there is going to be a chunk where I'm like, look, you just have to. This is a throwback to phase one. Imagine these things happen in the middle.
Yeah,
you know?
and for what we're getting for that trade-off are some really sweet musical tracks.
Yes, there's still a couple songs coming up. So
we're going to throw to a break. You're going to hear a message from one of our favorite podcasts, and then we will be back jumping right into the middle of Act 2 of The Phantom of the Opera, Love Never Dies.
See you then.
You, monster. We've trekked 1,000 miles across starless seas, blighted mires, and forests without end, all in seeking you, to ask you a question.
What are you looking for in an apartment?
Would you be a good Cub Scout leader?
Can I ride you, or would that be disrespectful?
Should I invest in subterranean realty?
Do you find it sexy when I T-pose and spin in a circle?
Every episode of Finding Monster Right has us asking questions like these, about monsters from folklore, pop culture, and our own world.
Join us as we meet alien allies, cryptic comrades, and friendly fiends. After all, it's not just a show about monsters, right?
Right.
Finding Monster Right.
We found you, now you find us.
Resuming Act 2. The next day, Carol, Jenny, and Keith sit down for breakfast at the theater's cafe.
Keith, how did you know all that stuff about King Ludwig? History Channel. Apparently, there's like one day a week where they still talk about actual real stuff that happened. I watched for like 2 hours waiting for the reveal that he was an alien or Bigfoot, but apparently he was just a regular dude. He was secretly gay, though.
Everyone's gay. Jenny, darling, would you mind getting me some more coffee?
Of course, love.
Jenny gets up, and Carol watches her closely as she walks away, then leans into Keith. Okay, except it turns out he's not just a regular dude anymore. He's a ghost.
What? Ludwig's our poltergeist?
Yes. He's been disappearing members of the cast and crew for weeks.
Where's he been taking them?
I don't know. That's problem number 2. Problem number 1 is figuring out what he wants. I need you to start interviewing everyone in the production to see if they've seen the spirit and if he's said anything to them.
Can do.
Jenny comes back to the table with the coffee.
Well, we've still got a few days until opening night. Shall we explore the town today?
Yeah, sounds great.
Keith?
Oh, Keith can't. He's,
I have to work. Work on what? I don't have anything for you. On opera. Opera? I'm writing one. You're writing an opera. I'm so inspired by this place. What's it about? Ghosts?
Carol kicks him under the table.
I mean aliens. Because History Channel. They say write what you know, you know? Well, I'm happy you're exploring your creative side. I just didn't know you were even a musician.
Carol chugs the rest of her coffee before Keith can answer anymore. Well, I'm ready. Let's hit the town. They do. It's a beautiful day, but Carol again seems distracted and distant. They pass through a market, and Jenny, of course, stops to look in the window of a local witchcraft shop. Carol is clearly a bit frustrated by this and asks if they can keep moving.
Hold on. Sometimes they have actual powerful artifacts scattered among the hokum in these shops.
I thought this was a no-magic trip.
Austria is known for its protective talismans, and you know we could always use more of those.
And I've told you no. If I put all the protective charms you wanted me to wear every day, my neck would break from the weight.
Look, you can just go on ahead. I'll catch up with you in a minute. Yeah?
Carol sighs and Jenny disappears into the shop. Carol wanders aimlessly through the market by herself. She suddenly shrieks and looks down to see a rat scurrying across her feet and darting into an alleyway. She watches it, then notices more rats, all coming from different directions but meeting up in the alley to form a steady stream. Curious, she follows them down the shaded alley, their numbers growing, until they all disappear through a crack in the stone wall of an abandoned building. There's no door on this side, but there is a window, so dirty it's opaque. Carol wipes the window with her sleeve, just enough that she can barely see through it. She gasps. The inside of the building is nearly completely dark, but through the faint bits of sunlight that do poke through, we can see that the floor is writhing with squeaking and chattering rats. The rafters, meanwhile, are lined with dozens of black birds fluttering their wings and cawing. There's a strange negative space in the back of the dark room. Some of the birds seem to be perched in midair, and after a moment we see that this negative space takes the shape of a man, standing hunched with birds on his shoulders and head and rats flooding his ankles. He speaks in a whisper that Carol somehow hears as if he's right next to her. He has a thick German accent.
Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before.
The laugh grows until Carol is surprised by a hand on her shoulder. It's Jenny, carrying a new shopping bag.
There you are. What are you doing way back here?
The voice is gone. There are no more rats in the alley. Nothing. Just exploring every nook and cranny. They head back to the market together. Okay, so let's talk about the stuff I need to breeze past.
Okay.
Because obviously, I've sort of just set up our conflict. What the movie would need would be rising action with a bunch of ghost set pieces, right? Escalating the haunting. I know that's a shitty thing to skip.
I'm not really one to point fingers on this particular thing.
I think our audience would rather I spend more time on the Carol-Jenny relationship.
I'm sure.
Than another tense scene of like a haunting or something. But that stuff does need to happen. And I'm not going to short shrift you on the horror altogether. But like those would be things that were just tension horror set pieces.
Sure. And we can workshop, like once I know what's going on, if you want to riff on figuring out what those things would be to fill in, that could be fun. Yeah. I think that's one of the fun things. We learned this a little bit during Hunchback. Sometimes when we have a script that's not fully baked, then we get to retool. We get to do our reshoots.
We can do some reshoots.
So we can figure out what's missing.
We really just need rising action. We need to extend the tension of this haunted opera. What I've written here is to keep with the musical conceit, let's just imagine this as a manic, spooky musical montage. And throughout the song, we would see Carol escaping from Jenny every night to go hunt the Phantom backstage, leaving Jenny lonely, disappointed. And every time Carol arrives just a moment too late and more actors are taken, right? So we would have like some horror sequences, more actors getting kidnapped, Carol trying to catch the ghost, things like that.
I also like, this is following more of the structure that when we were talking about My Phantom, the stuff that was missing in my script was also this exact chunk, right? It was the idea of we're in the theater. At this point, it would have been probably when they were trying to determine, like in Act 1, they're trying to determine, is there really a threat?
Yeah.
And then maybe during Act 2, during their attempt to stage Erica's musical, that we would have opportunity to get to know more of this cast, put them in danger, lose some of them, have the stuff happening. And so now we kind of, but that's not in that story, right? Now it can be in this one, but we are glazing over the same amount of stuff. But like you said, on this show, the things that people are pre-invested in right now are Carol and Jenny, and that, in fairness, is probably what matters more to us right now as storytellers as well.
And the purpose of this would just be to escalate the tension, which would be better served in a film than in this sort of abbreviated format, right?
Right. Ideas of movies.
What needs to be happening.
If you want real movies, hire us to write them, please.
Yeah. I do think it would be fun to have an interlude where Keith gets his own like patter song where he's comedically interviewing all the crew members and stuff. But none of them end up having any info for him because it seems like anyone who sees the Phantom ends up disappearing. The point is, rising action happens and the hunt is going nowhere. So let's move into the bigger stuff. It's the day before opening night, and Carmen, Weston, and Georg are in a panic. They've lost 6 cast members so far and have had to combine 2 secondary roles into one to make up for a missing actor. The police are hunting for the missing persons, but there's been no progress. It's all putting increasing pressure on Carol, who is determined to prove herself as an effective ghost hunter. Just before sundown, Carol and Jenny sit in their suite, Carol looking extremely stressed. Jenny comes up behind her and rubs her shoulders, which only makes her tense up more.
It's our last night in town before the big premiere. How about I take you out for a nice dinner tonight? We could go back to that place that puts whole slices of salami on top of their pizzas.
I don't know. I've got a lot on my mind tonight. Jenny stops massaging Carol and stands back. She's reached her breaking point.
All right, that's it. You need to tell me what's going on with you.
What do you mean?
This was supposed to be a relaxing vacation together, yet you've made every excuse in the book to spend as little time with me as possible. Even when we are together, you're distant, you're quiet, you're everything that Carol Laemmle isn't. Now, you're not leaving this room tonight until you talk to me.
I know about you and Jack.
What?
Your scheme. Your fake hauntings you set up just to keep me chasing my tail around the city like a stupid kid playing pretend.
Carol,
It was fucking humiliating, Jenny. How am I ever supposed to look through Jack again after that?
Well, you shouldn't have been going behind my back anyway. You started your ghost hunting business back up and then lied to me about it.
Because you don't give a shit about what I want. For the past 2 years, I've watched you get farther and farther away from me so you could become the Wicked Witch of the West Coast, and I've supported you every step of the way. But you know that ghost hunting has always been my dream. Hell, it's the only reason I'm in the stupid Dark Legion to begin with. But when I tried going back to it, it was just a flat no. No negotiation, no compromise. What else was I supposed to do?
What else was I supposed to do? Your chosen hobby is dangerous, and you know as well as I do what lies on the other side. You think I wanted to spend the last 2 years reading dusty old books and sacrificing mice in the bathtub? This isn't my hobby, Carol. It's painstaking work that I've been doing to protect you.
I don't need you to protect me. I need you to love me.
I'm doing this because I love you.
Well, I don't feel loved. I feel disrespected. I can't trust you anymore. I can't be myself around you. And if I can't be myself, then what are we doing here?
Carol, I'm sorry. Really, our visit to hell, it had a big impact on me. Perhaps it traumatized me a bit. And I've gotten so wrapped up in trying to keep you safe that I forgot to make you happy as well. Just tell me what I need to do to make up for it, and I'll do it.
I don't know. To be honest, I don't know if there's anything you can do. I don't know how to forgive you for this. Jenny's eyes well up with tears.
What does that mean?
Carol tears up as well. I don't know yet. I just need space. Carol turns and flees the room. Jenny begins to cry. A few minutes later, Carol walks through the shiny steel cavern of the Festspielhaus lobby with her phone to her ear. Hey, Keith.
Carol, what's wrong?
Nothing. I'm okay. Jenny and I just had a little dust-up. Where are you? Intercut with Keith, who is standing backstage with an impatient-looking actor, played by Christopher Abbott.
Downstairs, talking to the guy who plays Ludwig.
Stay there. I'll come join you. The Ludwig actor taps Keith on the shoulder.
Excuse me, can we move this along? I'd like to get some sleep before opening night.
The lights flicker, and Keith and fake Ludwig look up warily. Keith says to Carol on the phone,
Yeah, come on down. We can tackle this together.
He's cut off by an ominous laugh that seems to boom from everywhere. Cut back to Carol. Keith? Keith, you okay? Through the phone, we hear,
Oh my God. Hey, stay back, you. Hey!
Then there's muffled thumping, and the call goes dead. Carol sprints through the Festspielhaus, doing her best Tom Cruise run. She exits through the back to the top ledge of the amphitheater and flies down the aisle steps to the bottom. She finds the authorized crew members only door and goes through. The backstage lights are still flickering, some of them out, casting it in ominous shadows. Keith? Keith, where are you?
Over here!
Carol runs to the voice. It's the Ludwig actor, not Keith, lying on his stomach with his arms bound behind him in a complex and painful position.
Cut me loose, please! It hurts!
Carol does. Where did Keith go?
He took him.
Who took him?
The Phantom.
He's real.
He came for me, but your friend offered himself instead. He saved me.
Do you know where they went? The actor shakes his head.
All he said was, he was here to take me home.
Carol's eyes widen, realization dawning on her face. She turns and runs back to the door. Meanwhile, Jenny sits at the bar, drinking away her feelings. She checks to make sure the bartender isn't looking, then waves a finger to make the whiskey bottle levitate from behind the bar and refill her glass. A man sits next to her. It's Weston Hayden, the director. You know, a month ago I wouldn't have believed what I just saw. Now I just take it in stride. He grabs a glass from behind the bar. Can you do me? Jenny waves her finger and obliges. Weston takes a drink. This world keeps changing, and it's changing me with it, whether I like it or not.
You're Weston, right? The director of this whole production?
In theory.
Congratulations. I'm greatly looking forward to the show.
Yeah, well, you might want to temper those expectations.
Why's that?
Tough to put on a good show when half your cast has been abducted. I'd be surprised if we had any actors left by tomorrow night. Jenny sits up straight.
What are you talking about?
Oops. Guess I wasn't supposed to tell you that.
Says who? What's going on?
Depends on who you ask. But the prevailing theory seems to be that our little opera festival is haunted. Jenny's jaw drops.
I need to find my wife.
Cut to Carol. She's getting out of a taxi at the foot of the real Neuschwanstein Castle. It's enormous, resting at the peak of a foothill in the Alps, 2,500 feet above sea level, with endless views of the land below in all directions. Normally open to tourists, it's been closed for months due to vermin infestation. Carol ducks under the police tape and pulls open its front gate. Carol shines a flashlight into the dark entrance hall. It's huge, with 4 massive chandeliers hanging from its high ceilings. The walls are baroquely decorated and colorful, reds and golds and greens seen faintly in the flashlight beam. There's a doorway to one side of the hall, with standing candelabras flanking it. The candelabras are lit, and from the other side of the door, Carol hears a man screaming. Carol passes through the creaky door. The room on the other side is as large as a ballroom, but in stark contrast to the opening hall, it's completely barren. The floors are dusty and damaged wooden planks, the walls blank brick. There are no chandeliers, no decorations. This is one of the 185 unfinished rooms in the castle of the Mad King. Rats swarm past Carol's feet, heading deeper into the chamber. Birds squawk from the mantels. Keith's screams echo from somewhere distant. Carol trembles. Keith? Keith, where are you? Her flashlight lands on something, and she scans it with the beam. It appears to be a brass statue of a bull, but hollowed out, with one half of it swung open to reveal the interior. It sits in the center of a wide iron pit filled with charred logs, a fire pit. She shines the light into the bull's interior, and it lands on the charred corpse of a person. This maybe needs a little explanation. There's an old medieval torture device. There's basically a hollow brass bull, and they would cut someone's tongue out and put them in it and then light a fire under it so you could hear their screams as they roasted to death, and it sounded like a bull making noise.
That did require some explanation.
Yes. I was looking at medieval torture devices.
Are we going to see it in action here, or is that just
no? We just see the charred body inside.
Okay. That's your toast joke this week.
Yes, that's my toast joke. Carol gasps and turns the beam away. It lands on another device, a wooden table slanted up almost vertical. It's a medieval torture rack, with a corpse still tied by the ankles and wrists to its corners. Its body has been pulled in half at the waist, and black birds and rats gnaw at the rotting entrails spilling out onto the wood. The smell hits Carol and she retches. Next to the rack is an Iron Maiden, a punctured corpse still inside, more vermin perched on the spikes and feeding on the body. Carol hurries forward but stops when she steps in something wet. She looks down and sees that her foot has sunken into the soft, rotting backside of a man who died crawling toward the door. She screams and drops the flashlight, and that's when we hear the familiar laugh. A silhouette appears at the opposite end of the chamber. King Ludwig?
You flatter me, Mrs. Laemmle. As much as I admire the Mad King, I'm no royalty myself.
Then who are you? Suddenly, gas lamps turn on throughout the chamber, revealing in full the House of Horrors. It's filled with medieval torture devices, all of them occupied by mangled corpses in various states of decomposition. The missing actors. The Phantom stands in the middle of the room, played by Dan Stevens. Half of his face is limp and immobile, the skin on that half pinched and twisted and scarred. He's dressed in all black, and when he spreads his arms, the birds fly from the mantels to perch all along them, as well as on his shoulders and head. Behind him, Keith sits strapped to a chair, with his hands clapped in a set of iron thumb screws. He grunts and moans with pain, the screws set tightly into his punctured thumbnails.
I'm so glad you found me, Liebchen. Allow me to introduce myself.
stage for what would come to take place when I was born a blackbird alighted on the windowsill, casting a pall over my cherubic face. Was it a matter of the raven or my raising that got me fixed on clever ways to cause pain? Not one house pet proved any good at aging, and mother always wondered why my clothes were blood-stained. As I grew, more cats and doggies were spared. Sooner or later we must put away our toys. I graduated to more grand guignol and grizzly fare, 'cause puppy screams don't satisfy like little boys. Turns out I had a knack for Iron Maiden's torture acts and nightmares that would put Edgar Allan Poe to shame. Judas cradles, crushers, rippers, thumbscrews, strappers, and whips, though no hidden pendulum, it felt a bit cliche. And when they scream for me, they'll please ignore the name that leaves their lips is the raven. Then they speak nevermore.
Wait, oh my god. The Raven, you're the serial killer that tortured all those people in Berlin.
Ah, you're familiar with my work. Always nice to meet a fan.
But you died in a shootout with the police. Everyone saw it. Wait, are you a ghost?
Not quite, mein Liebchen.
Fuck.
Here's what really happened that night. Once upon a midnight dreary, a shot rang out and very nearly clipped the wings of a bird of prey with so much left to kill. But in the moment of my death, the Savior came with angel's breath and gave me a second chance to go enact my will. So when you dream of me rapping at your chamber door, when will fate allow your soul to wake? Quoth the raven, nevermore.
Dylan Roth, ladies and gentlemen.
Doing my best Dalton DeShane impression.
You did a wonderful job with that song.
I loved doing this. Thank you for letting me participate. Definitely helps to soothe my very fragile ego from this whole enterprise because
come on.
Oh, come on, Dalton. You're delivering this is an album that you've made, like an EP. These songs are fucking they're sick as fuck.
Thank you.
In more ways than one. And it's cool that I got to do this. I know you do sing the portion from Love Never Dies in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I hope you also saved yourself something to show off in this.
I did not.
Okay. Well then, double thanks. I come off that much cooler.
I'll put my original demos in the Patreon with me singing the girls' parts pretty badly.
Well, thank you for giving me the fucking cool ass villain song.
Yeah, of course.
Now I gotta go to producer mode for a second.
Sure.
It feels weird to not have established or teased anything about the Raven as a character up to this point.
Yeah, we've just kind of seen. I thought in a podcast setting it would be hard to do without telegraphing what I was doing with him. Like if I had like a news report says there's a serial killer in Berlin,
yeah.
I feel like background details would be easier to pull off. By the way, this version of the Raven is based on the Universal property, the Raven. So whoever guessed that I would take a little known Universal monster, I did.
Great job.
That one is about, obviously it has nothing to do with the Poe story, really. It's about a serial killer played by Boris Karloff, who has a disfigured face, which made him perfect for Phantom because half of his face is disfigured in that
terrific,
film. And I was like, cool.
It's a really good match.
That's our Phantom follow-up.
Yeah, I know that it's hard. Like you talk about this in your Black Lagoon episode, where like you wanted to put a lot of the sort of you had to, for the sake of the podcast, surface a lot of the sort of political subtext that you wanted to set up in the environment and talking about gender and making sure that you tee up those themes.
Yeah.
I do think that you still need to tee them up.
Here's what I will say, though, too, is that I have not quite reached my end game. And that, because right now it feels like the Raven is very disconnected from all of our Phantom stuff that's been going on. There will be a connecting thread that may make things feel a little more tightly tied together that hasn't been revealed yet.
I have to imagine that it has to do with whatever spirit it is that revived the Raven, maybe a familiar face, maybe just something that's, like a similar phenomenon to what we know. There is something that it's the kind of criticism that I'm thinking of because I think it's the kind of thing you would say if our positions were reversed.
Of course.
Now, in our franchise, the Phantom of the Opera, that title, the name The Phantom of the Opera, has likely become synonymous with Jenny Halsey, Carol Laemmle.
Yes.
But it is probably going to be jarring for anybody who sits down for a movie that has the Phantom of the Opera in it, even though you now have a Phantom at an actual opera.
Yes.
It is a leap from the sort of the premise identified with the title. It's a further leap. And I think for a sequel, that's like okay. But part of me kind of just thinks it should just be called Love Never Dies.
I mean, that is what the musical is called, is actually just Love Never Dies. But I wanted to make clear that it was tied to the first one. And yeah, I think what I was hoping, and maybe it doesn't work, but that because this was a sequel, I could go a little farther afield from what would maybe be expected from a straight up Phantom of the Opera thing. And I thought, especially as we go into phase 3, I was like, we have all of our various franchises. Wouldn't it be fun if instead of doing the Raven movie, we took some of these lesser known monsters we haven't used yet and integrated them into existing franchises that have already been established?
I have no complaint about that.
You know?
That sounds great. It's just a thing that it's not a response to the Raven specifically, right? Because the Raven essentially is our Phantom of the Opera this time.
Yes.
And as we've established, frustrating it or not, frustrating as it may occasionally be to listeners of a monster movie podcast where there are literal monsters and hell and all that stuff, the Phantom of the Opera historically not actually a paranormal figure.
Yes.
And this is more a paranormal figure than they normally are, right? Because at the very least, this is something that where some otherworldly thing has revived this person from the dead.
Yes.
So it is sort of, it kind of fits in pretty well. It's an escalation from the last one. It almost kind of makes me wish that we had sort of a Carol and Jenny banner to put it under. But this is all kind of minutia considering this is our podcast and people who are listening know what to expect.
Yeah, this is definitely more like Carol and Jenny, Love Never Dies.
Yes.
But
you have also done service to that title by having it, you've gone to a famous opera festival.
Yeah, I wanted to make it set in an actual opera. I wanted to give us a Phantom of the Opera. I quoted the Phantom of the Opera in that song, the actual song.
The musical quote there.
Yeah, the musical quote that happens there. So I wanted to try to fulfill the promise of the premise in as many ways as I could. Yeah. And I'm interested once Act 3 is over if you think I've done better or worse. Because
sure, and I want to give you the benefit of the doubt on that as well. Because
it might
actually
just make it. The thing that you're talking about, you might actually be, it might be more of a problem by the end of this.
Well, it's tricky because what a strange beast our franchise is. A set of fictional movies made for what is really a single silo of an audience rather than each of these. It's as movies, as we see with the MCU, what's important is that each of them has to be able to work as a movie that someone goes to see. But they also can stack on top of each other, especially when they're sequels, right?
Yeah.
Like Iron Man 2 wasn't sold to people who didn't see Iron Man.
Yeah.
Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is not for people who didn't see the first two.
Yeah.
So, that's fine. That's expected. The problem is when you have something like, like the Marvels, it feels like it's a sequel to 3 different things that not everybody saw. Right?
Well, and I will say, and this might end up being a recurring problem this phase because, and I know this was something you said about, I think Native American Werewolf as well, where it's like, as we approach the end of phase 3, I would say my storytelling priority is more in line with I want to make sure that our audience gets a wrap up for all these characters in the most satisfying way possible, more than this is an actual movie that will be sold.
Yeah,
and so I'm moving a little bit more into the comic book serialized storytelling than like if we marketed this as a Phantom of the Opera, would general audiences be happy? And I know that's a little bit against the premise of the show, but also the show is people want like listening for our story that we've built.
I mean, that's the thing is that playing the metagame has become less important to us as we've been writing, especially as like we engage with our audience and we see what's important to them and how much they like to play with the idea of, I wonder what Universal characters are going to do here. I would like to see this movie, yada,
and
yada,
I don't want to abandon.
We don't want to abandon that either, but it is kind of the interesting thing where like we have our own stories to tell right now. Like, the two main characters of this are a character that you wholesale created and one that we have extremely reinvented over the course of our series.
Yeah. Neither of whom are classic Universal characters that anyone would know.
No, exactly. Yeah. Like, so it is tough. I feel like it's my job as the foil on this episode to bring these things up.
Yeah, and you're right.
But I also like, I don't think anybody... Feel free to tell us in comments on Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, or whatever. Follow us at Dark Universe Pod, blah, 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 blah. Or on the Discord if you disagree. But like right now, it really does feel like that stuff has to come second. And it has to be up the story that we're telling. And, you know, Dalton, I'm certainly not going to tell you didn't do enough work on this episode. So it's, we still have a whole third act to get to, right?
Yes.
Are we at the end of Act 2?
Not quite. Okay. We're almost there.
All right. Well, let's get back in. Let's jump back in.
As the song ends,
5 minutes ago,
the Raven advances on Carol, backing her up against the exposed spikes of the Iron Maiden. We cut to black. We should have put the conversation there, but that's
we
okay.
Probably should have.
Back at the Opera House, Jenny has pushed Weston up against the hallway wall.
You're going to tell me every single thing about this phantom, starting with whatever you didn't tell Carol.
I had nothing to do with this. It was Carmen and Georg's idea to involve your wife, and they told her everything. Weston suddenly looks off to the side, remembering something. Wait, there was something they left out.
What is it?
Wagner's descendants are attending the premiere tomorrow as guests of honor. They're bringing a gift for Georg, something from Wagner's personal collection. Some sort of diamond-encrusted jar. What did they call it? A Bellamy? Jenny's face falls.
A Bellarmine.
That's it.
We have to go, now.
Jenny and Weston run backstage, where they find the Ludwig actor. By this point, I really should have named him, probably. Anyway, Jenny questions him, and he tells her the whole story, and that Carol left to chase after the quote-unquote phantom, but he doesn't know where they went. Jenny curses and thinks for a moment. An idea pops into her head, and she grabs Weston by the wrist and pulls him into the women's restroom. Jenny rushes to a sink, closes the stopper, and cranks the water on full blast.
Give me your hand.
What? She grabs his wrist and yanks his hand out over the water, then pricks his pointer finger with a needle. Ah! What the fuck? Jenny squeezes 3 drops of blood out of his finger into the sink before he pulls it away. Fucking maniac! Jenny digs through her bag and finds a hairbrush. She picks clumps of hair from it, tossing aside all the blonde until she finds a single strand of brown. Carol's. She drops it into the sink. Then she waves her hand over the water and recites a spell in an unrecognizable language. Clouds appear in the sink water, and they gather to form an image, turning the sink into a mini scrying pool. Jenny and Weston look down into it, and we cut to what they see. At the castle, Carol has been tied to a wooden rack next to Keith. The Raven looms over her, knife in hand.
You must be wondering about my face. It's okay, everyone does.
Carol struggles against the ropes. Yeah, why don't you tell me all about it, and feel free to make the story as long as possible. The Raven smiles. Cut back to Jenny in the bathroom. She pushes herself away from the sink in a panic. She reaches into her purse again and pulls out a tube of lipstick and uses it to draw a series of runes on the tile floor connected by a pentagram. Back at the castle, the Raven tells his story.
It was my first kill. I was inexperienced, nervous, skittish. She kicked away from me while my quivering fingers fumbled over the knots. Before I could catch her, she grabbed a knife and thrust it here.
He points to a scar on his neck.
Not deadly, luckily, but she managed to sever the 7th cranial nerve, which left the right side of my face in the state you see now.
Those cranial nerves, huh? So sensitive, and so many of them. Why don't you list them all for me? Very slowly.
You're funny, and quite fetching. Though that will change once I snip your own nerve.
He traces the knife along her neck.
I think I'll start with the 7th and work my way down from there. 1 by 1.
In the bathroom, Jenny sees this happen in the scrying pool. She looks at Weston and puts out her hand.
Your arm, please.
Weston hugs his arms to his chest. No way. Jenny grabs him and pries his arm away from his body, holding it over the pentagram. She cuts a long line down his forearm, and he screams as his blood spills onto the runes. Jenny closes her eyes and frantically recites another spell. She finishes, and the runes glow bright blue. Back at the castle, the Raven attempts to dig his knife into Carol's neck, but there's a sudden burst of blue energy, and he's thrown back across the torture chamber. He hits the wall hard and crumples to the floor, dazed. Carol is frozen in shock for just a moment before she goes back to work trying to untie herself. It's no use. The Raven is a pro. Keith, what do we do? Keith looks around helplessly, his eyes finally landing on his crushed thumbs.
I'm coming, don't worry.
He grits his teeth and pulls his hands back with all his might. His thumbs tear slowly through the screws, his nails splitting and blood pouring everywhere. He screams from the pain, but after a few gory moments, he's free. He runs over to the Raven to grab the knife. As soon as he does, the Raven grabs his ankle. Keith yells, then kicks him hard in the face, knocking him out again. Keith cuts Carol free and they run for the exit, into the cab waiting outside. Inside the cab, Keith wraps his injured thumbs while Carol makes a phone call.
Carol? Carol, is that you?
Jack, I need everything you can find on a serial killer named the Raven.
Serial killer? What's going on?
I don't have time to explain.
Okay. The Raven. Real name Edmund Bateman, German native. Police raided his home and found a house of horrors in his basement, including a dozen torture devices. Looks like the police shot him, confirmed the kill, but by the time the coroner got there, the body was gone.
He said something about a savior giving him a second chance. They must have brought him back to life somehow.
Carol, before you go, I just wanted to say how sorry I am.
Save it, Jack. I don't have time right now. She hangs up. Keith and Carol arrive back at the Festspiel house and reunite with Jenny, who is immensely relieved to see them. Weston and Georg offer to escort Keith to the local hospital. Once they're alone, Jenny says,
I'm so glad you're safe. Weston told me about the whole phantom thing. I was in such a panic.
I know who it is. It's not a ghost. It's a serial killer. Edmund Bateman, also known as the Raven.
And I know what he's after. A magical container known as the Black Bellarmine. It's a one-of-a-kind relic designed to be able to hold a person's soul.
Like a ghost trap?
Yes, kind of. It was last seen in the possession of the Nazis, but it must have made its way to Richard Wagner's private collection. His descendants are bringing it here tomorrow as a gift to Georg.
That must be what the Raven is after.
But why? What does he need with a soul reliquary?
Carol just shakes her head.
Well, we can figure that out later. Our objective is clear. Tomorrow night, we make sure the Raven doesn't get his hands on that Bellarmine.
Right. Hey, I'm sorry I didn't tell you about the whole phantom thing.
It's okay. I understand why. Let's go to bed, love. We need our rest for tomorrow.
She holds her hand out. Carol doesn't take it. I think I should head to the hospital and check on Keith.
Oh. Right.
He had the night from hell, and I want to make sure he's not alone.
Sure, of course.
It's pretty late, so I might just sleep there.
Well, in that case, I'll see you in the morning.
There's a long, awkward moment, each of them waiting to see if the other will say anything or move to embrace the other. Neither of them do, so Carol turns and walks away. End of Act 2.
It
hurts.
It does.
It hurts.
The thing is that, like,
they're being honest with each other now, but it didn't fix anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, it's late. Something new would have. Something has to. They need to have a much longer conversation, obviously, right?
But there's a lot of other things going on.
There's a lot else going on, right? But it is. Yeah, it's upsetting. We're very invested in these characters and the relationship. We kind of invented it, and we. So I think I've been growing a lot as a storyteller on the show, but the thing that I feel like I've been not lacking is I need to be better at being an editor and playing the producer, the foil role here.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm trying to bite back less against things where I'm like, I don't know if I feel like if I have an instinct about it, it'd be like, I like that these act breaks are landing at the big emotional turns.
Yes.
Because that's usually where I like them to go.
Mm-hmm.
But we are kind of ending. Again, these are just structural things. These are things that would probably shift a lot. And, you know, when you write a real screenplay, you don't put end of Act 1 and end of Act 2 on them. It's something that we do as a way to really, for this purpose, to evaluate how the structure of the story is going.
Sure.
We are now ending Act 2 at a place where I feel like your end of Act 2 is not where you've placed it.
Do you think the end of Act 2 is when Carol is still trapped at the Raven?
I think
trapped with the Raven?
I'm not sure. It's the kind of thing where I like that it feels like it's the emotional beat, but right now we've arrived at a place where we understand the stakes, but we also like there's that idea where like we sort of have a plan, we sort of have an idea. This this is the lowest point for our characters emotionally, but it doesn't feel like the lowest point in terms of the stakes of our characters yet. It feels like that may yet be coming, and that might be. It's hard. Again, we try to talk about this as we go, and it's hard to do that without actually getting to the end of the story. So I think maybe I need to table that.
Maybe, I mean, the thing with my Act 3 is, again, I don't know if my acts quite break in the cleanest way.
And I do feel a little silly talking about it because it is trying to talk about storytelling in a mathematical way that we know is kind of part of the format of our show.
Well, really, and I think the other thing that made me pick this as Act 3, the Act 3 is really just my final big set piece, right?
Yeah,
it's just the last
as it often
piece,
is when we do this, because that's how we do this abbreviated story, right?
Which has to be opening night of the opera, of
course. It has to be, right? But it's just the kind of thing where I am not accustomed to sitting here, and I know that has to do with how much of a time crunch you were on with this. And again, this music has made it entirely, I think, a worthwhile trade-off, and hopefully audience agrees.
I hope so, yeah, because the script was definitely done faster than my usual scripts because I was so focused on the music.
Yeah, but I think because of that, it feels more like something I would bring in. I don't mean that in a super complimentary way. I mean that in the sense that it feels unpolished in a way that your stuff usually doesn't, because it's not, right?
Yeah.
Because you've usually been more methodical you're still methodical. What I mean is you manage your time differently, and you get to make these sort of tweaks where I don't have that much to poke into. And here it feels a little bit like, I feel like I get an impression as to why we're leaving these characters here right now, and why it's in such a deliberately sort of like pins and needles place. That is really good for sort of where we want to be structurally in our story. It's fucking deeply unpleasant right now. There's other things that I want to say that are, because without getting to the end of the story, it's hard for me to like say, here's what you should do, and you should put that there and rearrange it. We need to get to the end of the story.
Well, I mean, but I did have that as I was writing it. Like I got halfway through Act 2 and realized I had all the plotting I had done in my head. I was like, oh, I've bitten off a little more than I can chew, in that there are so many things I would like to give more space to, and maybe I've introduced some things that maybe there's just not room to introduce. But
you have characters right now that I think you maybe in this story in its current shape, at its current length, that you don't need. But when you were to expand it out into a full 120 pages, you would want those characters, and you would want to give them things to do. For instance, we have this director, and we have the director, and we have whatever Georg's
we have the
job
director,
is.
we have the composer,
right? And we still have Carrie Ann Moss's character, who hasn't appeared in a while, right?
Yeah.
She's there to introduce all this stuff, but then she's
the creative director of the opera, so she kind of explains things,
right?
Yeah,
but the three of them right now are sort of serving the same narrative purpose, which is more or less, so far, we may discover that one of them has a different role here, is involved in the scheme or whatever.
Yeah,
but right now they're all sort of all exposition machines.
Yeah.
And they're all expositing about more or less the same thing from slightly different angles. And you would want to give them each something more unique to do, right? Like right now, Sterling K. Brown's character, the director, he has that sort of opposing angle where he's the skeptic.
Yeah.
And he gets involved in the action briefly. I don't know if he's going to get back into the action, but it is the kind of thing where like he's got some flavor, and some of that comes from just, I feel like great job with picking the cast on all this, by the way. You happen to pick a lot of my favorite people. Dan Stevens is one of my favorite. This is a big one for my favorite guys. We've got Dan Stevens, we've got Sterling K. Brown, we've got Carrie Ann Moss. And I think, again, like one of the reasons we cast on the show is part of that same thing, and part of that theater of the mind, helping to do a shorthand for what these characters are going to feel like, even when we don't have time to write a lot for them.
Yeah.
But it does make me feel as if right now they're kind of just there.
Yeah, I would hope that out of all of them, this is maybe the one where I've put enough into it that maybe it's easier to extrapolate what the full movie would look like. You know, that like it's nice to have a bigger cast, especially with like a Phantom type thing where maybe some people are thinking like, oh, well, who's the Phantom? We have maybe some suspects, like people that could be involved.
Right. And we also need some people to die. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
And we need to have but you've also spilled a lot of the blood off screen and then revealed it all in a big chunk. And it would be shocking. I also like that it is a really creepy subversion of Carol's fantasy from the previous film.
Yes.
She gets kidnapped into this sort of cleaned up, sexy S&M dungeon that's designed for her, right? Like, I mean, at least the adventure, like the implication in there is that Claudia she has this whole idea of being the Phantom, and then she realizes that it can end up like she stumbles upon the person that she has to play this con on as someone who's going to find this all very hot. And she decides, well, that sounds like fun.
Yeah,
I'll do that. I'll make that work.
Well,
right.
Also,
whereas this is somebody it is not the fantasy version. It's the real version. And that's terrifying. It's not sexy at all.
And with Carol's adventures, like wanting to be a ghost hunter kind of thing, I think the first Phantom is what she imagines and hopes that life is going to be like. Maybe not entirely, but then this is like how bad it can get, like I really be careful what you wish for kind of thing.
I didn't want to talk past that. I think that's really good. Yeah. I like that it's the kind of thing where whenever you're doing a sequel, especially like The Phantom of the Phantom is more or less a comedy, and this is not a comedy. So it doesn't kind of count as a comedy sequel. But when you do the comedy sequel, and really almost any genre sequel, you have the problem of you kind of want to do those echoes. You kind of want them to speak to each other. You want to take some of the same ideas and push them in another direction. And a lot of times that can be very cheap because it's just like that, but more, that, but bigger, that, but louder, yada, yada. I think it's a really effective way to take that and just make it like, this is the worst nightmare version of that.
Yeah.
And it feels, it's legitimately pretty chilling. But it does also put a lot of that violence off screen. I think we need more of it on screen.
Yeah. I am going to force us into Act 3 now, though, because we are going to have a lot to talk about after Act 3.
Let's keep rocking.
I can guarantee that. Act 3. In one continuous shot, the camera follows the Raven from behind as he exits a cab in front of the Festspiel house. He's dressed in a crisp, jet black suit, which he straightens as he gets out. The Festspiel house is flooded with guests in formal attire as the sun sets over the lake. We follow the Raven into the Festspiel house, where he strides confidently through the sea of people. We see various guests do a double take at his disfigured face, trying not to stare. The Raven doesn't seem to mind. He parts the crowd and heads straight for a door that says crew member access only. He flashes a key card at the lock and enters. He makes his way down the flights of stairs in no hurry into the backstage area. Backstage is a zoo of nervous performers, costumers, and tech people. Everyone's rushing in 1,000 different directions, but the Raven keeps his calm, cool pace. We see an actor talking with a group of his castmates. He says something in German and waves a pack of cigarettes and heads toward the load-in bay. The Raven follows. The camera finally stops in the load-in bay as the actor disappears around the corner to smoke. The Raven follows until they're both out of sight. The camera lingers here for a long while. All we can hear is the chaos of backstage. Finally, with a swell of music, the Raven reappears, dressed in the actor's costume. He's smiling. The camera follows him past a costume rack. The Raven pauses and digs in a box at the bottom. He comes up with a black face mask, which perfectly covers the twisted half of his face. The long shot ends.
It's a cool Phantom riff there, not just with the mask, but the idea of going in and replacing the actor. So that's dipping a little bit more into the Phantom of the Opera well, which is a thing that I asked for. So I'm going to acknowledge that.
Back upstairs, Carol stands on the upper level of the lobby, speaking into an earpiece. She's dressed to the nines in a beautiful deep green gown. She spots a man and woman being escorted through the crowd to the VIP area. I got eyes on the Wagners. Cut to Jenny, standing out on the lip of the amphitheater, also looking gorgeous in a red gown, her hair curled.
No sign of the Raven out here yet.
Back to Carol. Same here. A voice from behind her makes her turn.
Mrs. Laemmle.
It's Carmen, cutting a slender figure in a sleek black dress.
I trust you've ensured tonight's performance will go off without a hitch.
Just cleaning up the last loose ends now. Behind Carol, we can see the Raven cutting his way through the crowd, the same as we saw a few minutes ago. Don't worry, I won't let you down. A few minutes later, Jenny looks through a pair of opera glasses at the front row of the amphitheater.
Got us on the Wagners. They're seated.
Do they have the thing? The black bellissimo?
Bellarmine.
We see her POV through the opera glasses. The man is unwrapping something from a velvet cloth. It's an ornate golden jug with the image of a woman etched on it. She looks frightening, with angry eyes and a fanged mouth. The jug's stopper is adorned with a huge black diamond.
They've got it. Just as I thought. It's got the black Orlok diamond on it.
Please stop making up words.
It's an ancient and very powerful gem embedded in the head of the jug.
When this is all over, you better give me some ancient and powerful head. Jenny smiles, surprised and hopeful at this unexpected flirtation.
Yes, ma'am.
The lights go dark. The last bit of magenta light glows on the horizon. Georg Barta comes out on stage and gives a welcoming speech that I am absolutely going to just skip past. But it ends with him welcoming the night's special guests, the Wagners, to the stage. They get up, wave at the crowd, and start down the long walkway at stage right that bridges the island stage to the shore.
Jug's on the move.
Still no sign of the Raven here. He's got to be close. Jenny's cell phone rings. She answers it.
Weston?
Yeah, we got a problem. Cut to Weston, who's standing in the loading dock, looking down at the unconscious actor in his underwear, a crumpled black suit lying next to him. Jenny shifts her focus to the actor standing in the wings until she lands on a figure wearing a black half mask, a smile on his face.
I've got him. He's disguised as a cast member.
Jenny slips out of her heels and slides into a pair of emergency Crocs and sprints down the aisle of the amphitheater, shouting to Carol.
He's in the wings, on stage already. He's going to intercept Georg when he exits with the Bellarmine.
I'm on my way. Jenny, Tom Cruise runs, in a fucking gown, mind you, in heels and backwards, across the metal walkway floating on the surface of the lake. She looks at the stage and sees the Wagners giving the Bellarmine to Georg, who gives a small bow and thanks. The crowd applauds. Georg begins to exit to the wings where the Raven waits on the opposite side of the stage from Jenny.
Fuck!
Jenny arrives backstage and pushes her way past the actors getting to their places. When she gets to the opposite side, the Raven and Georg are nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, orchestral music booms from all around. The actors are going on stage. The opera has started. Jenny looks around desperately, and then she sees a glimpse of movement from above. A figure dashes across a catwalk. Jenny heads to the steel stairs and gives chase. The catwalks here are a maze, built to be hidden behind the various towers of the massive castle set. Each staircase stops at multiple platforms with large windows overlooking the stage so actors can lean out and sing from the different levels of the towers. Through this maze, we get a classic catwalk chase scene. The Raven tries to drop sandbags and lights on Jenny, but she is in magic mode, catching them with glowing orbs of light and stepping out of their paths. You know, more phantom shit. She uses a different spell to trip the Raven and send him sprawling. Finally, Jenny and the Raven end up at the highest platform in the center tower of the castle with nowhere else to go. Through the window, we can see the crowd on the shore watching the opera, oblivious to the chase because there's no light on this window. They face off on the platform.
Give me the Bellarmine.
The Raven reaches behind his back and pulls out 2 knives. Jenny just rolls her eyes, then puts out her hand and clenches her fist. The Raven levitates up into the air, grasping at his throat as if he's being strangled.
Give it to me now before I rip your telltale heart out of your chest and bury it at the bottom of the lake.
From behind her, a voice.
He doesn't have it.
Jenny turns to see Carmen Lebleu standing on the other side of the platform. In one hand, she holds the Bellarmine. Her other is on the shoulder of Carol, whose hands are tied behind her back with a steel chain and padlock.
Carmen? Put him down, Dr. Halsey. What are you doing here? Put him down before I kill your wife.
Jenny is speechless. She complies, and the Raven walks over to Carol's other side.
Normally, I would just let you kill him, but it's so hard to find a good familiar these days. Edmund here may be a bit unconventional in his methods, but he's effective and very loyal. Now, you can give up your quest for the Bellarmine, my dear. I was just taking back what's mine. What do you mean, yours?
Carmen holds it up to display the engraving.
Look, it's even got my picture on it. Carmen, what are you? Let's dispense with the facade, shall we? You can call me by my real name, Carmilla.
At this point, I would like to remind everyone that Carmilla is played by Carrie Ann Moss.
Woo! Perfect! A+, no notes. This was a trap. You brought us here to deliver that Bellarmine to you.
Jenny, I'm so sorry. I was so stupid.
I didn't bring you here for the Bellarmine, Dr. Halsey. I got that on my own without any problems. I brought you here for the soul I plan on putting into it. You made your own soul reliquary, yet you don't have the magic to fill it? I don't need just any soul, my dear. I need one person in particular to help me with what's coming. You see, there's a war coming. Yes, so I've heard. Oh no, my dear. The war has been lost. It's too late for everyone, but I have plans to position myself on the winning side. Unfortunately, those plans involve someone who's been cursed, someone damned to the underworld with powerful magics. A soul like that cannot be plucked at a whim. In fact, there's only one spell that can do the trick, a spell that was contained in the Egyptian Book of the Dead.
Jenny's face goes pale.
Luckily, I knew just who to go to. The famous Dark Legion, with every detail I needed to get you here spelled out for me in Miss Falk's riveting tell-all. A haunting to lure Mrs. Laemmle, who would bring her powerful witch wife along for the ride.
You fucking bitch! Why does this keep happening to us?
Now you're going to use your magic to summon that soul. And if you're a good girl, I'll give you your wife back without harming a single hair on her head.
Don't do it, Jenny.
Even if I wanted to, I can't just make that happen out of nowhere. Black magic like that requires a sacrifice at a much larger scale than most. Oh, don't worry. We've got that covered for you. Edmund.
The raven tugs a pulley, and the body of Georg Barta falls from above, a gag in his mouth. He lets out a muffled yell just before the rope goes taut around his neck, snapping it and killing him. The raven approaches the body and slips off one of Georg's shoes, slicing a cut into the sole of his foot, bleeding him out onto the platform.
Time to work your magic, Doctor.
Seriously, Jenny, don't do it. I have this under control. Jenny looks down, resigned.
Whose soul do you need? Someone I believe you have a prior relationship with. A princess, robbed of her throne. A throne I plan on returning to her. No. Amenet.
Jenny, you can't. Do not do this.
I have to. I can't be the one responsible for your death.
It will be okay, I promise. Jenny, just this once, I need you to trust me.
I'm sorry, Carol.
Jenny holds her hands out and begins reciting a spell in Coptic. Her eyes go black. Georg's blood begins to burn through the steel like acid, but it doesn't open up into the catwalks below. It opens a pit into hell. The pit widens, surrounded by purple energy, flames shooting up out of the hole, making everyone wince from the heat. Jenny continues reciting the spell and finishes with one word.
Amenet.
Black smoke rises out of the pit and shapes itself into a series of symbols, the same ones etched onto Amenet's face in the 2017 Mummy film. We hear whispers of her voice. Carmilla opens the lid of the black Bellarmine, and Amenet's soul is pulled into it. The hellish pit closes up, and everything is back to normal.
Now give me my wife.
Carmilla nods.
I'm a woman of my word.
The raven releases Carol and she runs forward. To everyone's surprise, her hands are already untied. Jenny, what the fuck? I told you I had it under control.
How on earth was that under control?
Carol shows Jenny what's in her hand. It's the universal lockpick that Jenny discarded. I was literally seconds away from chaining the raven to the railing and getting away.
Oh my god.
You're not the only one with tricks up her sleeve. As she says this, she suddenly staggers sideways against the edge of the castle window.
Carol, what's wrong?
Something feels wrong. She staggers again, and Jenny grabs her to support her. Jenny looks at Carmilla.
What did you do to her? I didn't do anything, Dr. Halsey. Although I would advise you to read your grimoires a bit more closely before burning them. The spell you just cast requires so much more than one human sacrifice. A cursed soul must be traded for something much more valuable. For example, the soul of someone you love.
Jenny looks into Carol's eyes with panic.
No.
She's right. I can feel myself slipping out of my body.
No, stay with me, Carol, please. Just give me a second. I'll think of another spell.
Carol's eyes soften, and she cups Jenny's face with her hand.
Don't look at this as tragic. This life, you can't control it. There's cost to every magic, but one thing can't be stolen. Love never dies. Love will continue. Love keeps on being. my wife, by my...
Carol dies. Carol goes limp in Jenny's arms. Jenny loses her grip and Carol's body falls backwards out the open castle window. She falls in full view of the 7,000 spectators. The crowd gasps. She lands with a thud in the center of the stage. The actors on stage scream, prompting the audience to scream, and everyone begins to stampede for the exits. Up in the castle tower, Jenny looks in horror down at her wife's body. She backs away, and her eyes land on the universal lockpick lying discarded on the steel platform. Her eyes fill with tears, and she falls to her knees.
And with that, our business is concluded, Dr. Halsey.
She turns to the Raven.
She's all yours, Edmund.
Carmilla turns and descends the steps with the Bellarmine. The Raven grins and draws his knives.
On this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore.
He grabs Jenny by the hair and yanks her head back, putting his knife to her neck.
Quoth the Raven.
Jenny looks up at him with boundless rage in her eyes.
Nevermore.
An explosion of demonic energy erupts from her body, throwing the Raven back against the railing and sending him falling hard to the platform below. We cut down to the lower platform where the Raven gets to his feet with a moan. Jenny suddenly lowers herself through the air, body glowing like she's a fucking Super Saiyan.
A fan of Poe, are you? Now, hold on.
Jenny lands lightly on the platform.
And torture, is that right?
She advances on him and then slices her finger through the air. A cut appears in the belly of the Raven's shirt.
Maybe you'll recognize this one then.
She slices her finger again and a shallow cut is opened up in his stomach, just enough to draw blood.
Stop! No!
He backs into the railing. Jenny slashes her finger again and he screams out. He tries to run, but Jenny uses her magic to pin him in place. She slashes back and forth, more furiously now, the invisible blade slicing into his belly each time. Jenny roars with rage, tears falling from her eyes, until finally the Raven's head goes limp and his intestines spill out onto the platform. But still, Jenny isn't done. She keeps going, consumed by anger, until he's severed clean in half at the waist. She finally calms, breathing hard, and then waves her hand, sending both halves tumbling over the side of the platform into the lake below. Jenny catches sight of Carmilla fleeing across the walkway to the shore. She takes flight again, rocketing through the sky and landing in front of Carmilla, blocking her way.
Oh, poor Edmund. I was hoping he'd hold out just a little longer than that. Give me the Bellarmine. No need to apologize, dear. I never had any plans to make him immortal. He's not my type, you could say. You of all people should understand that. Give me Aminette's soul, and I'll kill you quickly. You naughty flirt. Your wife's body isn't even cold yet.
Jenny raises her hands, glowing with demonic energy.
Now, this has been a lovely first date, but I must be going. I hope we cross paths soon.
She gives Jenny a wink, and Jenny unleashes a barrage of purple flames at Carmilla. But instead of engulfing her, they seem to stop a foot in front of her as if there was an invisible barrier. When the flames fade, Carmilla has transformed into a bat, carrying the Bellarmine in its feet. She takes to the skies. Jenny tries to use magic to pull the Bellarmine away, but again it's deflected by some invisible force. Jenny is left alone on the walkway, looking at Carmilla fade into the distance. She turns and looks across the water at the stage. It's empty now, except for Carol's body, crumpled in the spotlight. Sirens approach in the distance. Jenny looks like she wants to run to her wife's side, but at the same time, she can hardly bear to look at her. She wrestles with herself, before turning and fleeing towards the shore. Outside the Festspiel house, a cab pulls up, and Keith gets out, hands bandaged. He runs through the crowd and is met by Weston.
What happened? Are Carol and Jenny okay?
Weston shakes his head. I'm sorry. Carol, she fell from the tower. Keith bursts into tears and Weston hugs him.
Where's Jenny?
Weston just shrugs. They both look around the chaotic courtyard. Cut to the backstage area, now deserted. A hand grabs a pile of clothes from a changing table. Cut back to the courtyard where Keith and Weston are looking for Jenny. Behind them, a figure swims upstream through the crowd. It's Jenny, dressed in a black hoodie pulled up over her head. We end on a close-up of her vengeful face, purple energy leaking from the corner of her bloodshot eyes. The end. Mid-credits scene. A car pulls into the overgrown driveway of an abandoned, decrepit mansion. Dr. Jennifer Halsey gets out of the driver's seat, dressed in a long, dark blue leather trench coat. She turns back to Jekyll, who sticks his head out of the window, and tells him to be a good boy and wait for her there. She makes her way to the back of the mansion, to the steel hatch that seems to lead to the cellar. Jenny waves an arm, ripping the door clean off its hinges and throwing it hard off-screen. She storms down the stairs, and we realize this is not a cellar. It's a high-tech bunker of some kind. She descends deeper and deeper through the steel shaft. Her movement is traced by a series of automated security cameras. When the tunnel levels out, Jenny is confronted with a series of deadly booby traps. They don't even slow her down. She uses magic to deflect projectiles, walks on air over spikes in the floor, rips laser emitters out of the wall without lifting a finger. She is a force of nature. Finally, she comes to a door at the end of the hallway and blasts this one off its hinges as well. She enters into a high-tech war room, weapons decorating every wall except for the one covered in monitors. A figure sits facing that wall, back to the camera, looking at the damage Jenny has caused on the monitors. Impressive. Nobody's ever cleared all my defenses before. You even disarmed the magical barriers without triggering the failsafes. So, have you come to kill me?
No. Consider this my job application.
The chair swivels around, revealing Adelaide Van Helsing, played by Micah Monroe. And what job am I hiring you for? Jenny's face is as hard as stone.
Killing the last remaining vampire clan.
Adelaide smiles. You mean...
Carmilla must die.
To be continued in The Invisible Man's Revenge.
Do we want to do the post-credits now, or do we want to talk about this first?
I'll leave it up to you.
Let's talk about this first.
Okay.
There's so much to talk about.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. So let's first address the really big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say now that this is something that you and I talked about. It's not something that you and I were like fully in agreement about, but it's a thing that you alerted me to at the beginning, was that you were planning to kill off Carol in this story.
Honestly, as soon as I knew it was going to be called Love Never Dies, I knew that's what I had to do.
Okay. And I have been skeptical from that point that it can be done in a way that is not going to alienate our listening audience.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have been very clear since before we made plans to break anybody's hearts deliberately, that I do not believe it is an artist or storyteller's job to make the audience comfortable and to make them happy. It is their job to make them feel something, and it is an audience member's job to decide whether that's something they want to feel or continue to feel, right? So, killing off our sweetest, most beloved original character is not something that I automatically have a revulsion to. However, I have to acknowledge up front that it is the cheapest heat that you can do in this situation on paper, right? Not talking about methodology yet. Obviously, it can be done here, and I'm not even saying that it hasn't been done well.
Sure.
I'm just saying up front that kicking the puppy is the shortest geometric path to I want to hurt my audience right now.
Sure.
That being said, gosh, it's tricky. It's hard for me to judge because I knew it was coming, but I do think that you set it up well. I think that as we were talking about character deaths last time.
Mm-hmm.
And again, knowing that this was coming, I should probably have reconsidered the Esmeralda death last episode anyway, because it just would have been back to back.
Yeah.
So kind of makes me feel a little bit better for our choice to not ultimately kill off Esmeralda.
Reshoots. Yeah.
But this is it is, God, it's such a bummer. And there's not really any denouement to take the foot off the gas of that, right? It reminds me of that way of thinking about Buffy again, of The Gift, season 5 of Buffy, the original series finale, which ends with Buffy throwing her body off of this high ledge down to the bottom of and it's kind of one of the things I kind of pictured it with. And there's no more dialogue after she dies. We get her last words repeated to us over voiceover after her death. But there's no more dialogue. I even think that the conversation between Keith and Weston at the end should go.
I honestly almost that wasn't originally intended to be there, but I felt like I needed something. The denouement is just supposed to be her killing the Raven, but obviously that is not an actual resolution because Jenny loses.
Yeah, and that's again. These are horror. We try to remember. We're trying to stay our roots. We want horror in all of this.
Yeah,
and this is a horror story about in a very true, generic, non-derogatory sense.
Yes.
This is a doom of Jenny's own making. I really like the symbolism of the sonic screwdriver, right?
Universal lockpick.
Lockpick. Sorry, BBC, don't sue us. Last people on the list to sue us. The universal lockpick being this symbol of Jenny as she was before this all started happening, before her paranoia took hold of her, right? And also of the cleverness of a person who does not have magic, which is something that maybe Jenny in her pursuit of these dark forces has kind of forgotten about, right? She's discarded this. And you could view that as sort of presaged earlier on or rehearsed, that discarding the universal lockpick is almost like discarding Carol's utility. She doesn't even see Jenny, like superhero secret agent Jenny from 2 movies ago as someone who should be taken seriously, let alone Carol.
Yeah.
Right? And so the idea that Carol was going to save herself using something from Jenny's old playbook that she no longer values, I think that's really good. I also appreciate that we have this sort of tragic death along the catwalks, like in Love Never Dies, at the end of that, and also the scene that you have in the beginning. You tie that together in a way that we both voiced a little bit of annoyance that I could not do in my version. So that's a really good setup and payoff. I also, pretty much as soon as you told me you wanted to use the Carol and Jenny love theme in one of your compositions, I assumed that was going to be what Carol was going to die to. And so it was.
Well, can I say a secret there?
Okay.
Your love theme maps perfectly onto the chord changes for Love Never Dies,
which of course was a complete accident.
If you go back to Carol's Lament, the chords in the chorus are the chords from Love Never Dies, and the high counterpoint is just the melody from Love Never Dies, playing against your melody for the love theme.
Well, I look forward to looking back and listening to that.
Yeah. And so then they mashed up perfectly well together for the reprise.
That's just a really great, happy coincidence. There's so much here that's really working for me.
I want to say that what you were saying about like the universal lockpick and everything, the one thing I really wanted from her death, I wanted to make sure that it felt both inevitable and also completely preventable.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's how tragedy works, right?
All of the emotional direction of the movie is leading to this, so that we know that Jenny's going to make the wrong call, but that there was a right call to make. Carol says, I need you to trust me just this once.
And it's a thing that she's been wanting the whole film. And that's why I do not feel that Carol's death here is cheap. I feel as if you have been working and I know that you've done this, you built the whole movie up to that point.
Yes.
And I feel like you've done that. There's other stuff that I don't know feels as well put together. And that's more of the grander lore stuff. You cannot have Carmilla in this and have her do no vampire thing until she turns into a bat and flies away with the box. I think you need to have that character, Carmen, in more of the movie.
Yeah,
we talked about that. We need all these supporting characters if we're going to lead towards the idea, which again kind of felt like it was going that way, where one of these characters is part of the villain plot. We need all of them to have a little bit more to do. There's a reason, obviously, why that was not really feasible for today's draft. Right?
Well, we're already going very long.
They all need more things to do. They all need to seem either suspicious or likable in a certain measure, so we can at least be considering what that we need that built up to a little bit more.
Yes.
And because I am on the kick of, I really do think that obviously, the people who we interact with about the show most often are the people who listen to it over and over again.
Yeah.
So the average listener, it's been months since Dracula Lives. Maybe they didn't make the connection of, who might Carmilla be? Because the first time her name has been dropped on screen in the show, except for when we named the Cross of Carmilla after her in House of Dracula.
Yeah.
So we hadn't even said for sure, Dracula, the final vampire clan on Earth is Dracula's. We've implied that it's Dracula's sister, and we've never said that it's Carmilla.
Yeah.
So
could use some more explanation.
Yes, that's a lot. That's a lot to throw in during the climax of a movie that's not about vampires.
Mm-hmm.
We also have the Ominet thing, right?
Yeah.
These are all things that in a full draft need to get built to.
Sure.
In the sketches that we're doing here, I don't think there's anything that you have that's incompatible with the fuller vision, with the grander vision of this movie as you're imagining it. And that's really what we need to be critiquing here.
Yeah. My other big kind of trick here is, as devastating as I know that it is for Carol to die, I also think, as you said, like, I didn't do this to be a fuck you to the audience. I did this for character purposes and narrative purposes, but I think it's important. I don't think you should be doing just fan service every time, but I also don't think you should be kicking your audience. And so I do try to counterbalance some things here where, yes, you're outraged at Carol's death, but also we now have Carmilla and the return of Ominet, which gives you something to kind of pump your fist for.
And you have the alliance now between Jenny and Adelaide. Yeah. So the subtraction of Carol is far more additive than it would be if it was just for killing off this character.
Because it is really, not to spoil too much, but I've said how all my Phase 3 movies are going to be connected.
Yeah. And
Carol's death is the propulsion point.
Yes.
We are now off to the fucking races for the next few movies. This is an inflection point for Phase 3.
Yes.
I wanted this to be a big... This is a turning point.
And this is about halfway between here and Death's Door.
Yeah.
So, hell, I think it packs a real serious punch. I think the music helps a lot. Mm-hmm. Also, in that same way that you talked about how Jack's song in My Phantom helps to get through a lot of emotion quickly.
Yeah.
In a way that would maybe have been difficult to do in a less heightened film.
Mm-hmm.
That works here. Really, I think the main thing, I think we just need more of a lot of particular things. I think there's pacing stuff. It has that problem that a lot of my scripts here have on the show, which is that the first act, all the setup, all the setup is very fully fleshed out. And then the rising action and everything but the climax itself is what you've delivered is your Act 3 of Act 3. That thing you always talk about, you want to have the rest of your Act 3 is not here yet.
Yeah.
You have your Act 3 of Act 3.
I think I was faced with a choice, which was, do I give more time to the character stuff for Carol's death or more time to plot stuff for the Carmilla and Ominet?
You made the right choice.
And I think
you
I
absolutely
had to
made the right
choice. Yeah.
Both because those are the things that we care about in the ongoing narrative of our story, the things that are not going to be interesting to talk about and fill in the gaps in our host segments here. And also because, like, I think at this point, like, that's why people are here.
Yeah.
Right.
And I had to trust that the audience will fill in those kind of gaps on their own.
I mean, people have said that it's more fun to fill in the sort of continuity shit for themselves.
Yeah.
Like that they don't want us to fill it in. They'd rather do it themselves. So I think, first impression, I think that you have done a good job here of making this work in a way that does not feel exploitative. It does feel like the story belongs to both of them. They both feel like complete people. Their relationship is complicated. It does not feel like kicking a puppy because neither of them are puppies.
Yeah.
They are people. They have both made big mistakes here, but the person who made the bigger mistake is the person who suffers in terms of watching the other person die. Right. And that is, I think that's good horror. And I think he wrote some really fucking killer music here.
Thank you.
And I got to sing the fucking cool villain song.
This whole pitch was a fucking tightrope walk for me. I was threading a lot of very small needles.
This was very hard. And we're really looking forward to hearing what you all have to say about it.
Yes.
I now have to read my post-credits scene to continue the story of Dracula.
As a quick recap, we have had 3 previous post-credit scenes. Basically, Dracula has been in hell after passing through the door at the end of Dracula Lives. In that hell, he's been forced to relive or sort of live out anew failures at the hands of his enemies, where he is continually tortured and killed over and over and over again. He was finally offered a way out into hell out of these sort of torture pits into hell by Pazuzu in exchange for killing Set, Nick Morton, and Adelaide Van Helsing.
How is he going to do that? We don't know, but that's the deal.
We don't know.
So he's been set loose. To do that. Now, we're going to have to talk after the post-credit scene about some things that might have to change. Let's see.
Okay.
We cut from black to a stone tower as it explodes from within, torn apart by a gunpowder explosion. It collapses into rubble, and we pull back to see a strange, burning city. There is no consistency to its architecture. Modern skyscrapers stand alongside medieval watchtowers. The neon light of a casino illuminates a battle flag on an ancient parapet. Beneath the windswept flag stands a lone figure. He leans forward against the edge of his battlement, gritting his teeth. It's Ahul, played by Joe Taslim, who watches helplessly as his city burns. If anyone forgot, Ahul is Dracula's brother from Indonesia. A hatch behind Ahul bursts open and a vicious mob, citizens, not soldiers based on their garb, rushes Ahul and tears at him with knives, teeth, and nails. If you freeze frame, you'll find Dion, the woman who Ahul hypnotizes and drains, and Dracula lives among them. Ahul recoils as a reflex, but does not appear surprised. He does not protest or fight back as the crowd lifts his bloodied body, hoists him over the tower's edge, and drops him to his death. We see his body land on a pike, now one of hundreds of Ahuls skewered at the tower's base. We pan up to find Ahul, once again alone at the tower's peak, looking down at his many remains. A voice behind him speaks. This is your hell? Ahul turns to see Dracula standing behind him, still human, still missing an arm, but otherwise looking better than we've seen him in a while.
I suppose it looks more like heaven to you. Suffering, destruction.
On the contrary, I'm frankly shocked that the gods of death would grant you such a flattering form of flagellation.
Flattering?
The fuming masses rising up against you, burning their own world to the ground, dooming themselves by refusing your benevolent rule, and you forced to watch, to accept their judgment, the shame of your failure to save the world. It's practically a monument to your self-importance. Ahul's eyes narrow.
You're not an apparition. It's really you. How?
I've been granted wandering privileges by one of hell's lower demons. I'm on a quest.
And, once again, you've stopped to ask me for directions.
Perhaps I simply wish to visit my baby brother.
Just tell me what you want and leave me to my eternal torment.
In the distance, another tower crumbles. We hear the sound of screams, both pained and victorious. In order to arrange my travel visa, it was necessary to make a few lofty promises. Promises I could certainly fulfill on my own under ordinary circumstances, but given my present condition, I may require some additional muscle.
And you expect me to fight for you?
Gods, no, Ahul. Again, you flatter yourself. There's practically no one who's ever lived who can boast the experience I need. I'm looking for someone with intimate knowledge of our jailer, and, perhaps, a grudge of her own. I'm looking for Amenet. Cut to black.
We both brought back Amenet at the same... After 3 phases of not even mentioning her, we both decided to bring her back at the exact same moment.
Now, here's the challenge I think we should maybe use. I think we should maybe have to keep both of these.
I think we have to keep both of these. I think, because part of the thing is, like, by exchanging these post-credits scenes, part of the challenge is we don't know what the other person's going to write.
Right. And we're trying to build them towards a point where they will meet. Like, at some point, our post-credit stuff has to intercept and we talked a little about how it might intercept the main core story.
But Amenet is no longer in hell.
No, that's the thing. Is my thought was going to be my initial thing was going to be looking for Ahul to direct him where in hell he might find Amenet. Let's not worry about how he would know that.
But he and Ahul don't know that Amenet's gone.
That's the thing.
So they're going to go looking for her, and who knows what they might find. And that's for me to figure out.
Yes. So that is an interesting new challenge. We love to throw each other challenges week after week here on Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe? And
Amenet is now the most popular girl at the dance.
All right. Shout out to Roxanne on the Discord. Amenet's biggest fan. Hopefully this has been a balm to the bummer of the rest of the episode.
We have to end things now.
We really do. We're about to hit 3 hours. We have a bonus episode to record.
Let's lock it in.
It's alive! In the name of God! Now I know what it feels like to be God!
If you would like to download the songs that you heard here and listen to my original demos, put them on your phone, listen to them on the go, you can find those at our Patreon, patreon.com/Dylan and Dalton. Follow us on all social media. And in 2 weeks, we will be joined by the voice of Hunter Marin themselves, Kendra Wells, who will be pitching, Dylan,
The Thing That Couldn't Die.
We're resuming to actual classic Universal horror after our Scott Pilgrim versus the World deviation for a pitch like that. And then 2 weeks after that, Dylan will present Cat People. So we are not even halfway through phase 3 and shit is getting wild. Please let us know what you thought on social media or on the Discord. And until then,
stay afraid of the dark universe.